Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1, I live in a cabin deep in the woods. No neighbors, no trespassers. So when I woke up one morning and saw muddy footprints across the kitchen floor, I panicked. I hadn't left the house. The door was locked, but the trail started from the basement where I never go. I followed the prints down the stairs, heart pounding. At the bottom, I found something worse than a break-in, an old mattress flattened by years of use and walls covered in scratched tally marks, hundreds of them. Someone had been living down there long before I moved in, and they knew the layout of the house better than I did. The real estate agent never mentioned a basement. When I bought this place, she handed me the keys with a smile that felt too rehearsed, too practiced. Her fingers lingered on mine for a moment longer than necessary, and I caught something in her eyes, relief maybe, or guilt. I should have asked more questions then, but the price was too good to pass up. A steal, she called it. Now I understand why. The mattress reeked of something I couldn't identify, sweet and sour at the same time, like fruit left too long in the sun. I knelt beside it, my hands shaking as I examined the fabric. The stains weren't random, they formed patterns, deliberate marks that spoke of routine, of someone who had made the space their own for years. The tally marks on the walls weren't just scratches. They were organized, grouped in sets of 7, weeks, months, maybe years of someone counting their days in my basement. I found a box hidden behind the old furnace. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, all taken from inside the house. Pictures of the previous owners eating dinner, watching television, sleeping. The angles were wrong, shot from impossible positions, from inside walls, from beneath floorboards. Someone had been documenting their lives without them knowing. The most disturbing part wasn't the invasion of privacy. It was the final photograph in the stack, the previous owner's car packed with suitcases, driving away. The date stamp showed they left in the middle of the night, 3 months before the house went on the market. I called the real estate office the next morning. The receptionist told me the agent who sold me the house no longer worked there. She'd quit suddenly, right after my closing. No forwarding address, no explanation. When I pressed for details, the woman's voice dropped to a whisper. She mentioned something about the agent receiving threatening phone calls about that specific property. Calls from someone claiming to be the rightful owner. The police were less helpful than I'd hoped. The officer who took my report seemed uncomfortable, shifting in his chair whenever I mentioned the basement. He kept glancing at his partner, exchanging looks I couldn't decipher. When I showed them the photographs, the older officer's face went pale. He asked me to wait while he made a phone call. 20 minutes later, he returned with a manila folder thick with documents, the case file of the previous owner's disappearance. They hadn't moved away, they'd vanished. Their car was found abandoned at a rest stop 2 states over, but they were never located. The investigation had gone cold after 6 months. No leads, no suspects, no explanation for why they'd left everything behind, family photos, wedding rings, even their medication. The detective assigned to the case had retired early, citing stress-related health issues. He'd moved across the country and refused to discuss the case with anyone. I started sleeping with a chair propped against my bedroom door. The footprints appeared again, this time leading from the basement to my bedroom window. They circled the house 3 times before disappearing into the woods. I set up cameras, but they malfunctioned every night. The memory cards were always blank, except for one frame that showed a figure standing in my kitchen, face obscured by shadows. The timestamp indicated it was taken while I was asleep upstairs. The local librarian helped me research the property's history. The records were incomplete, with several years missing from the archives. What remained painted a disturbing picture. 7 different families had lived in the house over the past 2 decades. All had left suddenly, abandoning their belongings. The pattern was consistent. New owners would move in, live peacefully for several months, then disappear without explanation. The house would sit empty for a year or two before being sold again, always at below market prices. I found a journal hidden beneath the basement stairs. The handwriting was cramped, desperate. The entries chronicled someone's growing obsession with the house and its occupants. They described watching families through the walls, learning their routines, their fears, their secrets. The writer claimed to have built passages throughout the house, spaces between the walls where they could move unseen. They called it their home, their sanctuary. The families were just temporary guests who had overstayed their welcome. The final entry chilled me to the bone. It was dated just 1 week before I moved in. The writer had grown tired of watching from the shadows. They were ready to reclaim their space, to make the newest occupant understand the rules. They knew I lived alone. They knew I was vulnerable. They were waiting for the right moment to introduce themselves properly. I tried to leave, but my car wouldn't start. The battery was dead, the tires slashed. My phone had no signal, though it worked fine in town. I was trapped exactly where they wanted me. The footprints appeared nightly now, growing bolder. They led to every room, circling my bed while I slept. I woke up to find my kitchen rearranged, my clothes moved, my food partially eaten. Someone was living in my house with me, and they wanted me to know it. The scratching sound started on the 7th night, soft at first, then more insistent. They came from inside the walls, moving through the house like a living thing. I followed the sounds with a flashlight, pressing my ear to the drywall. The scratching would stop whenever I got close, as if the thing inside was listening too, waiting, planning. I found the entrance behind the water heater, a section of wall that swung inward on hidden hinges. The passage was narrow, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. It connected to a network of tunnels that ran throughout the house. I could see light filtering through gaps in the walls, tiny holes that provided a view into every room. Dozens of photographs were tacked to the tunnel walls, all showing me eating, sleeping, showering. Someone had been documenting my life from the very beginning. The truth hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't the first person to find this place. The previous owners had discovered it too. That's why they'd tried to leave. That's why they'd packed their car in the middle of the night, but they hadn't been fast enough. The thing in the walls had stopped them before they could escape. I'm writing this now because I hear footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate steps moving through my bedroom, the same room where I'm supposed to be sleeping. I've been hiding in the basement all night, but I can't stay here forever. The footprints are fresh in the dust around me. They circle my hiding spot, drawing closer with each pass. Soon, I'll have to face whoever has been sharing my home. Part of me wonders if I'll be the next to disappear, another name added to the long list of people who couldn't escape this place. The scratching has stopped, the footsteps have stopped, everything is quiet now, too quiet. I can hear my own heartbeat, feel the weight of eyes watching me from the darkness. Someone is down here with me, someone who knows these tunnels better than I ever will, someone who has been waiting patiently for this moment. I should have listened to the real estate agent's eyes. I should have asked why she was so eager to be rid of this place, but it's too late now. The house has claimed another victim, and I suspect it won't be the last. The footprints were never meant to be hidden. They were meant to be found. They were the beginning of something much worse than a break-in. They were an invitation. Crime 2, I always thought I was too old to fear what might be hiding under my bed. That changed when I heard a voice whisper my name from beneath the mattress. At first, I blamed a dream, stress, maybe even a neighbor's TV. But the whisper came again, clearer, closer, and more urgent. I got down on my knees and looked. There was nothing, just darkness, but the floor vent next to the bed was loose. When I pried it open, I found an old recorder tucked inside. It was playing on repeat. and in the background of the recording, I could hear my own breathing. The device was ancient, one of those handheld recorders from decades past, the kind police detectives used before everything went digital. My hands trembled as I rewound it to the beginning. The voice that emerged wasn't mine, but it knew things about me that no stranger should know. It mentioned the scar on my left shoulder from a childhood accident. It described the exact placement of furniture in my bedroom. It even referenced conversations I'd had with my landlord about the creaking floorboards. The recording was poor quality, filled with static and background noise, but beneath the whispers I could make out other sounds, footsteps, the soft closing of a door, someone moving carefully through what sounded like my own apartment. The most unsettling part was my breathing captured while I slept, unaware that someone was documenting my most vulnerable moments. I called the landlord immediately. He arrived within an hour, his face pale when I explained what I'd found. He claimed he'd never given anyone else a key, but his eyes kept darting toward the windows as if he expected someone to be watching. Together, we examined the vent system. It connected to other apartments in the building, creating a network of pathways that someone could potentially use to move unseen. The landlord suggested calling the police, but I hesitated. What would I tell them? That I'd found a recording of someone watching me sleep, that my own breathing was somehow evidence of a crime. Instead, I decided to investigate on my own. I needed to understand who had been in my space and why. That evening, I installed a small camera in my bedroom, positioned to capture anyone who might enter through the vent. I also placed tape over the vent opening, thin enough to break if disturbed, but invisible unless someone looked closely. Then I waited. For 3 nights, nothing happened. The tape remained intact. The camera recorded only my own restless sleep. But on the 4th night, I discovered something that changed everything. The tape was broken, but the camera showed no signs of entry. Instead, it revealed something far more disturbing. I had been sleepwalking. The footage showed me getting up in the middle of the night, walking to the vent, and carefully removing the tape. I moved with purpose, as if I knew exactly what I was doing, but my eyes were closed, my movements mechanical. I watched myself reach into the vent, retrieve something, and then return to bed. The camera captured me doing this for several minutes before I finally settled back into sleep. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I had been the one placing the recorder in the vent, but I had no memory of doing so. The whispered voice on the recording wasn't a stranger's, it was mine, distorted by the poor audio quality and my own unconscious state. I had been documenting my own sleepwalking episodes, creating a mystery that I then discovered as if it were the work of an intruder. But this explanation raised more questions than it answered. If I was sleepwalking, why was I recording myself? And why did the voice on the recording seem to know things about me that even I had forgotten? The mention of the childhood scar, for instance, I rarely thought about that incident anymore. Yet the voice described it in detail, as if accessing memories buried deep in my unconscious mind. I decided to set up additional cameras throughout the apartment, hoping to capture more evidence of my nocturnal activities. What I discovered was a pattern of behavior that spanned weeks, possibly months. I had been creating elaborate scenarios while sleepwalking, staging scenes that would later puzzle and frighten my conscious self. The vent wasn't the only hiding place I'd used. I found notes tucked behind picture frames, written in my own handwriting but containing information I didn't remember recording. There were photographs hidden in books, images of my apartment taken from angles that suggested someone had been watching me. But the metadata on the photos matched my own camera, and the handwriting analysis I conducted myself confirmed that everything was my own work. The most disturbing discovery came when I found a journal hidden in my closet. The entries were written in my handwriting, but they told a different story than the one I remembered living. According to the journal, I had been experiencing blackouts for months. The sleepwalking episodes were just the visible tip of a much larger problem. The journal described entire conversations I'd had with neighbors, confrontations with strangers, and even interactions with people I didn't remember meeting. One entry particularly stood out. It described a conversation with a previous tenant who had lived in my apartment years before I moved in. According to the journal, this person had warned me about the building's history, mentioning incidents of break-ins and unexplained disturbances. But I had no memory of this conversation, and when I tried to contact the previous tenant, I discovered they had died in an accident shortly after moving out. The journal also contained detailed observations about my own behavior, written as if I were studying myself from the outside. It noted patterns in my sleep, changes in my mood, and even physical symptoms I hadn't consciously noticed. The entries became increasingly paranoid, suggesting that someone was manipulating my environment, altering my memories, and possibly even drugging me. But the most chilling aspect of the journal was how it ended. The final entry was dated just days before I discovered the recorder. It read, "The subject is becoming aware of the experiments. Countermeasures must be implemented to maintain the integrity of the study. The voice recordings have been successful in creating the desired psychological response. Next phase, direct confrontation with the evidence." I am sitting here now, staring at that final entry, trying to make sense of what it means. Did I write this about myself? Am I conducting some kind of psychological experiment on my own mind? Or is there someone else involved? Someone using my sleepwalking episodes to manipulate me into believing I'm losing my sanity? The recorder still sits on my nightstand, its presence both accusatory and protective. Sometimes I play it back, listening to my own voice describe intimate details of my life with the detachment of a clinical observer. Other times I hear something else in the recording, a second voice, so faint it might be my imagination, responding to my unconscious monologue. I've considered leaving the apartment, but something stops me. Maybe it's the fear that the problem isn't with this place, but with me. Maybe it's the growing suspicion that wherever I go, I'll take this mystery with me. Or maybe it's the possibility that I'm exactly where I need to be to solve a puzzle that spans far beyond my own sleepwalking episodes. The truth is, I'm no longer sure which version of myself to trust. The conscious me who discovered the recorder, or the unconscious me who placed it there. Both seem equally real, equally unreliable, and somewhere in the space between sleeping and waking, between memory and imagination, the real answer waits. Crime 3, I caught it by accident, just a flicker in the corner of my eye. I was brushing my teeth, looking straight into the mirror when my reflection blinked before I did. I froze, told myself it was just imagination, but then it smiled ever so slightly while my face stayed neutral. I ran out of the room, heart racing. Later that night, I taped a sheet over the mirror. The next morning it was gone, not torn, not on the floor, gone, as if someone had carefully peeled it away. Now every time I walk past that mirror, I avoid looking in, because I'm not sure I'll be the one staring back. The police report sat on my kitchen table for weeks before I finally opened it. The investigator had been thorough, meticulous even, but there were gaps, questions that led nowhere. The victim had lived alone in the apartment below mine for 3 years. We'd exchanged polite nods in the hallway, nothing more. She worked from home, kept to herself. The kind of person you barely notice until they're gone. I became obsessed with the details. The way her coffee mug was found on the counter, still warm. The television playing the same news segment on repeat. Her laptop open to an email she'd been writing but never sent. everything frozen in a moment that felt deliberately staged. The first time I went through her belongings, I told myself I was helping. The landlord needed someone to sort through her things before the family arrived. I volunteered, seemed like the decent thing to do. But as I moved through her rooms, touching objects that still held traces of her presence, I realized I was searching for something specific. I just didn't know what. Her journals were hidden behind a false panel in her closet, dozens of them dating back years. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. She wrote about watching people, not in a creepy way, but with the precision of someone who understood that human behavior followed patterns. She documented her neighbors, their routines, their secrets, including mine. The entry about me made my hands shake. She'd noticed things I thought nobody could see. The way I left my apartment at exactly the same time each morning. How I always checked my locks 3 times before bed. The fact that I never had visitors, never played music, never made a sound after dark. But what disturbed me most was how she'd written about it, like she was afraid of me. I started visiting her apartment more frequently. The police had finished their investigation, ruled it an accident. Carbon monoxide leak from a faulty heater. Case closed, but I couldn't let it go. I'd sit in her chair, read her words, try to understand what she'd seen in me that I couldn't see in myself. The breakthrough came when I found the photographs. She'd been taking pictures through her window, documenting the building across the street. But when I looked closer, I realized she wasn't photographing the building. She was photographing the reflections in its windows, reflections of our building, reflections of specific apartments, mine. In photograph after photograph, I could see myself moving through my apartment, but there was something wrong with the images. The timestamp on the camera showed she'd taken them during the day, but in the reflections, my apartment was dark, and I was doing things I didn't remember doing, standing motionless in the center of my living room, staring directly at her window for hours. I confronted my own memory, forced myself to account for every moment of those photographed days. I'd been at work, I had receipts, security footage, witnesses, but the photographs didn't lie. Someone who looked exactly like me had been in my apartment, behaving in ways that would terrify any observer. The final piece came from her last journal entry, written the day she died. She'd figured out the truth about the reflections, about what she'd been seeing in my apartment, about why I never seemed to sleep, never seemed to be where I was supposed to be. She'd realized that the person she'd been photographing wasn't me at all. I destroyed the photographs, burned the journals, convinced myself that her death really was an accident. But late at night, when I catch glimpses of myself in reflective surfaces, I see what she saw. The slight delay in my movements, the way my reflection seems to anticipate what I'm about to do. The subtle differences that suggest I'm not looking at myself, but at something else entirely. The carbon monoxide detector in my apartment has been chirping for weeks now. I should replace the battery. I should check the heater. But I can't bring myself to do it, because I'm starting to understand that she wasn't the first to notice, and I'm terrified that I might not be the last. The mirror in my bathroom remains uncovered now. Every morning I force myself to look, to confirm that I'm still the one looking back. But each day, the reflection seems less like me and more like someone who's been studying me, learning my expressions, perfecting my mannerisms. Someone who's been waiting for the right moment to step through the glass and take my place completely. I've been thinking about moving, starting over somewhere new, but I know it won't matter, because wherever I go, whatever I do, my reflection will follow. And sooner or later, someone else will notice what she noticed. Someone else will start taking photographs. Someone else will figure out the truth. The truth that I'm not sure I'm ready to face myself. Crime 4, there's a drawer in my desk I've never been able to open. Not with keys, not with force. It's always been stuck. until the day it slid open like it had never been locked at all. Inside was a single item, a photo of me sleeping, taken from the foot of my bed. My blood ran cold. I live alone. There was no timestamp, no note, just the photo. And below it, carved into the wood, were 3 words etched with something sharp. Nice to meet, not meet you, just meet. Like the sentence wasn't finished yet. I stared at that photo for what felt like hours. The angle was deliberate. Someone had stood at the foot of my bed, watching me sleep, close enough to hear my breathing. The quality was too good for a phone camera. This was professional equipment, someone who knew what they were doing. The carved message troubled me more than the photo itself. The wood was old, the etching deep. This wasn't fresh. Whoever did this had access to my desk long enough to carve those words without rushing. They had taken their time. I started checking my apartment differently after that, looking for signs I had missed. The spare key I kept under the planter by my door was still there, but the soil around it seemed disturbed. The lock on my bedroom window had scratches I couldn't remember seeing before. Small things, easy to dismiss if you weren't looking for them. I called the building manager. He was a quiet man who kept meticulous records. When I asked about anyone requesting access to my unit, he checked his logs twice before answering. No maintenance requests, no inspections. No one had been given permission to enter. But he mentioned something else. The previous tenant had left suddenly, middle of the night, rent paid through the end of the month but just disappeared. Left everything behind. The manager had boxed up the belongings and stored them in the basement, including a desk, my desk. The basement smelled of dampness and forgotten things. The storage unit was crammed with boxes, each labeled with careful handwriting. I found what I was looking for in the corner, a box marked personal items desk. Inside were old receipts, pens, a small notebook filled with addresses I didn't recognize, and at the bottom a key. The key fit the drawer perfectly. I went back to my apartment and opened the drawer properly for the first time. Beneath where the photo had been, I found more items, a small stack of photographs, all taken from inside different apartments. Different people sleeping, different beds, but the same angle, the same professional quality, the same watching. There was a pattern I started to notice. Each photo had a small mark in the corner, a number. The photo of me was marked 47. I counted, there were 46 photos before mine. The notebook from the basement had 46 addresses. I spent the next few days visiting those addresses. Most were apartments in buildings just like mine. Some people had moved away. Others had no idea what I was talking about when I carefully asked if they had ever noticed anything unusual. A few remembered feeling watched. One woman mentioned finding her spare key moved. Another man said he had started sleeping with his bedroom door locked after having vivid dreams about being photographed. But it was the woman from the 33rd address who changed everything. She lived in a basement apartment with bars on the windows. When I showed her the photo with her number, she didn't seem surprised. She invited me in for coffee and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. She told me about the previous tenant in my building, how they had worked together, how they had met through a photography club, how what started as artistic exploration had become something darker, how she had tried to stop it when she realized how far it had gone. She showed me newspaper clippings, missing persons reports, people who had simply vanished, not all of them, just some, the ones who had asked too many questions, the ones who had gotten too close to the truth. She told me the previous tenant hadn't left in the middle of the night. They had been taken by someone who knew what they were doing, someone who had been cleaning up loose ends, someone who had been very careful about covering their tracks. I asked her why she was telling me this. She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. Because, she said, you're number 47, and I need to know if you're here to finish what they started, or if you're just another victim who got too curious. I left her apartment with more questions than answers. The coffee had tasted bitter. My hands were shaking as I walked back to my car. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone following me, but the streets were empty. When I got home, I found something new in the drawer, a fresh photo. This one showed me sitting in the basement apartment, holding a cup of coffee. The angle was wrong for any security camera. Someone had been there. Someone had been watching. Below the photo, new words had been carved into the wood. The same careful lettering, the same deliberate message. Nice to meet you. The sentence was finished now. I understand now why the previous tenant left everything behind, why they disappeared in the middle of the night, why the building manager never heard from them again. I also understand why I was chosen, why the drawer opened when it did, why I was meant to find those photos, why I was led to that basement apartment, why I was given just enough truth to make me curious, but not enough to keep me safe. The woman from the 33rd address had asked me if I was there to finish what they started. I think I know the answer now. I think I've always known. But I'm not sure if I'm the one being hunted, or if I'm the one doing the hunting. The drawer is empty now. I've removed everything. But sometimes when the apartment is quiet and the shadows fall just right, I can still hear the sound of someone carving words into wood, slow, deliberate, patient. And I realize that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be continued. The photo of me sleeping is still in my possession. I've studied it carefully. The angle, the lighting, the composition, it's good work, professional work. I should be terrified. I should pack up and leave like the previous tenant did, but I'm not going anywhere. I've been practicing with the camera, learning about angles and lighting, about patience and timing, about how to wait in the shadows until the moment is right. The drawer isn't empty anymore. It's just waiting for the right collection to fill it. After all, someone needs to continue the work. Someone needs to finish what was started. And I'm discovering that being watched isn't nearly as frightening as realizing you were always meant to be the one doing the watching. Crime 5, the place was cheap, too cheap, but I needed somewhere to stay. The landlord said it had been vacant for years, but I kept finding strange things, crumbs in the sink, footsteps in the dust, even the scent of cigarettes in a non-smoking unit. Then I found a diary hidden behind the wall heater. The pages were full of obsessive notes about me, where I went, what I ate, what I said on the phone. The last line stopped my breath. He still hasn't noticed me. I started checking the vents, the attic, the crawl space. And I realized something terrifying. This wasn't my apartment. I was the intruder. The first sign should have been the keys. They felt warm in my hand, like someone had been holding them moments before. The landlord handed them over with trembling fingers, avoiding eye contact. His voice cracked when he mentioned the previous tenant had moved on, but something in his tone suggested finality beyond relocation. I moved in on a Tuesday. The apartment smelled of vanilla and dust, but underneath lay something else, something metallic and sharp that made my throat tighten. I attributed it to old pipes or forgotten cleaning supplies. The living room window faced east, flooding the space with harsh morning light that revealed scratches on the hardwood floors, as if furniture had been dragged repeatedly across the same paths. My first night, I heard water running in the kitchen. I found the faucet turned on, a steady stream filling a glass that hadn't been there before. The water was ice cold, and when I lifted the glass, my fingerprints joined others already smudged on the surface. I convinced myself I'd been sleepwalking, though I'd never done so before. The diary appeared 3 weeks later. I was adjusting the wall heater when my finger caught on something behind the unit. A small leather journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, with dates spanning months. But the dates made no sense. They were recent, starting from the day I'd moved in. New tenant arrived today. Tall, dark hair, carries coffee in a blue mug. I owned a blue mug, had used it that very morning. He talks to himself while cooking, says perfect when the toast pops up. My hands shook as I flipped through more pages. Every mundane detail of my life was recorded with clinical precision. The time I spent in the bathroom, the shows I watched, the phone calls I made to my sister. Even conversations I'd had with delivery drivers were transcribed word for word. He orders Chinese food on Wednesdays, always requests extra soy sauce, tips in cash. I had ordered Chinese food every Wednesday since moving in. Always tipped the same driver, always asked for extra soy sauce. But how could someone know these details unless they were watching me constantly? The entries grew more intimate. Notes about my sleeping habits, the way I scratched my shoulder when nervous, the specific brand of shampoo I used. Someone had been close enough to smell my hair, to notice the small scar above my left eyebrow, to document the exact words I muttered during nightmares. He dreams about water, calls out for someone named Marcus, wonder if Marcus is still alive. Marcus was my childhood friend who drowned when we were 12. I'd never told anyone about the dreams, never spoken his name aloud in this apartment. Yet here it was, written in someone else's careful script. The final entry was dated yesterday. He still hasn't noticed me. I started searching then, methodically checking every corner of the apartment. The closets revealed nothing unusual, but the walls sounded hollow when I knocked. The bathroom mirror sat slightly askew, and when I straightened it, I found tiny holes drilled through the wall behind it, holes just large enough for someone to see through. The kitchen cabinets had false backs. When I pried one open, I discovered a narrow space filled with empty food containers, the same brands I bought, the same flavors I preferred. Someone had been eating my food, replacing it before I noticed, studying my preferences with the dedication of a researcher. In the bedroom, the heating vent was loose. I removed the cover and found a small camera, its red light blinking steadily. The device was warm, recently used, connected to wires that disappeared into the wall. I followed the electrical cables with my phone's flashlight, tracing them through the apartment's infrastructure until they led to a section of wall that didn't match the others. When I pressed against it, the wall gave way slightly, a hidden panel painted to blend seamlessly with the surrounding surface. Behind it lay a space barely large enough for a person to crouch, but clearly lived in. A sleeping bag, canned food, bottles of water, and dozens of photographs, all of me, taken through windows in the hallway at the grocery store. The photographs were organized by date, each one labeled with notes about my behavior. Seems nervous today, bought different cereal, stayed up late watching the news. Some were taken from inside the apartment, impossible angles that could only have been captured by someone hiding in the walls. I found personal items too, a toothbrush, prescription bottles with the labels torn off, and clothing that smelled of cigarettes and unwashed skin. Someone had been living in my walls, watching me, documenting my every move, surviving on my food and utilities while I remained oblivious. But the most disturbing discovery was a second diary, older than the first. This one contained entries about the previous tenant, someone who'd lived here before me, who'd experienced the same mysterious occurrences. The handwriting was identical, the observations equally detailed. The final entry about that tenant was chilling. He's starting to suspect, time to find a new place. I realized then that I wasn't the first person to live unknowingly with this observer. There had been others, a succession of tenants who provided entertainment and companionship for someone who'd made the walls of this building their permanent home. Someone who moved from apartment to apartment, selecting occupants like a viewer choosing television channels. The landlord knew. His nervousness, his reluctance to discuss the previous tenant, his insistence on cash payments with no background checks. He was complicit in this arrangement. Perhaps he'd been threatened, or perhaps he'd simply chosen to ignore the situation as long as the rent was paid. I called the police, but what could I report? Trespassing, stalking. The evidence was circumstantial and the perpetrator had vanished. The hidden space behind the wall was empty now, cleared of all personal items except the photographs and diaries. Even the camera in the heating vent had been removed. The detective who took my statement suggested I'd been the victim of a break-in, someone who'd been watching the apartment and had fled when discovered. But I knew better. This person hadn't broken in, they'd never left. They'd been here long before me, would likely be here long after. I moved out that same day, but I couldn't escape the feeling that I was still being watched. In my new apartment, I sometimes catch glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision, hear sounds that shouldn't exist in an empty room. I've started checking my food more carefully, looking for signs that items have been moved or replaced. I've installed my own cameras, changed my locks multiple times, but the sensation persists. The most unsettling realization is that I may never know who was living in those walls. The photographs showed someone's shadow occasionally, a glimpse of clothing, but never a clear face. They could be anyone, a former tenant who'd never officially moved out, a maintenance worker with access to the building's infrastructure, or a stranger who'd found their way into the walls and decided to stay. Sometimes I wonder if they've followed me, if they're reading this account from their new hiding place. If they're taking notes about my current habits, my new routines, my attempts to feel secure in a world where privacy might be nothing more than an illusion. The diary's final entry haunts me. He still hasn't noticed me, because the truth is I still haven't seen them. They remain invisible, a presence felt rather than observed, a reminder that we might never truly be alone in the spaces we call home. Crime 6, I decided to rip out the carpet in the living room. The boards underneath were soft, uneven. One felt completely hollow. I pried it up and found a tin box rusted shut. I broke it open expecting junk, but what I found were old baby clothes covered in stains, a pacifier melted into a clump, and a list of names, dozens of them crossed out one by one. The last one wasn't crossed out, it was circled, and it matched my initials. Someone had marked me. And whatever game this was, I was the next move. The smell hit me first, not rot, not decay, something chemical, sharp, like cleaning products mixed with something organic. I lifted each piece of clothing with the tip of a screwdriver, afraid to touch them directly. The fabric felt wrong against the metal, too stiff, like it had been treated with something. The stains weren't random, they formed patterns, deliberate patterns. I photographed everything before I touched it. The list was written in careful handwriting, each name in blue ink except for the crossed out ones. Those were in red. My initials sat at the bottom, circled twice in that same red ink. The paper was yellowed but not old enough to crumble. Someone had been planning this for years, maybe decades. I called the previous owner. The woman who sold me the house answered on the fourth ring, her voice already defensive before I spoke. She claimed she'd never seen the box, never heard of hidden compartments, but when I described the baby clothes, she went quiet. Then she said something that made my skin crawl. Some things are better left buried. The next morning, I found myself at the local records office. The clerk, a tired-looking man with ink-stained fingers, helped me trace the house's ownership back 50 years. 7 families had lived here. 3 had left suddenly, selling far below market value. 2 had families with young children who moved away without forwarding addresses. The pattern was there, written in property transfers and rushed sales. I started visiting the neighbors. The elderly woman next door remembered things. She spoke in fragments, her memory selective but sharp where it mattered. She remembered babies crying at odd hours, then sudden silence. She remembered moving trucks arriving in the middle of the night. She remembered asking questions and being told to mind her own business. One detail haunted me. She described a man who used to visit the house regularly, always carrying a small bag. He drove different cars each time, never the same one twice. He had gentle hands, she said, the kind you'd trust with a child, but his eyes were wrong. She couldn't explain what she meant, just that his eyes didn't match his hands. I found the first crossed-out name in an old newspaper archive. Missing person report from decades ago, a young mother who disappeared with her infant. The case went cold after 2 weeks. No body, no evidence, no suspects, just gone like smoke. The second name led to another missing person case, then another. The pattern was becoming clear, and it made me sick. The tin box felt heavier each time I picked it up. I started keeping it in my bedroom, checking it obsessively. The red ink seemed darker some days, brighter others. I measured the clothes against baby sizes, tried to determine ages. They ranged from newborn to toddler. Too many clothes for one child, too many sizes, too many stains. I hired a private investigator. She was professional, skeptical, but something in her expression changed when she saw the list. She recognized one of the names immediately. Her sister's friend who'd vanished 30 years ago with her baby. The case had destroyed her family. They'd accused the father, then the grandfather, then given up hope entirely. The investigator's hands shook as she photographed the evidence. We started mapping the dates. The disappearances followed a pattern, roughly every 3 to 5 years. Always young mothers, always with infants, always in this neighborhood within a few blocks of my house. The local police had never connected them because the cases were spread across different jurisdictions, different departments, but the pattern was undeniable once you knew to look. I couldn't sleep in the house anymore. The floors creaked differently now, like they were settling around secrets. I heard sounds that might have been pipes or might have been something else. The basement smelled like that chemical odor from the box, even after I'd moved it upstairs. I started spending nights in my car, parked across the street, watching my own house. The investigator found records of a man who'd worked as a handyman in the area for decades. He'd done renovation work on all the houses where families had disappeared. Always small jobs, always involving the basement or crawl spaces. Always paid in cash, never leaving a paper trail. The description matched what my neighbor had told me. Gentle hands, wrong eyes. We tracked him down through old business licenses. He'd moved away suddenly about the time the disappearances stopped, but he'd left something behind. A storage unit paid for years in advance, abandoned when the payments stopped. The investigator got a warrant. Inside, we found more boxes, more clothes, more lists, more names. But we also found something else, photographs, dozens of them showing the interiors of houses, including mine, pictures of floorboards, basement walls, hidden spaces. He'd been documenting his work, keeping trophies. The photographs were dated, spanning decades. The most recent ones showed my house before I'd bought it, before I'd found the box. The investigator went to the authorities. The case was reopened, then closed again. Insufficient evidence, they said. The photographs proved nothing. The boxes could have been planted. The handyman had died 3 years ago, they discovered. Heart attack, case closed by death. But I knew better. I'd found something they'd missed. Hidden in the last box, wrapped in tissue paper, was a key. Small, brass, with a number etched into it. I recognized it immediately. It was a key to a post office box in the next town over. The box was still rented, still receiving mail, bills mostly, but also something else. Letters addressed to my name, delivered to a box I'd never rented. The letters were instructions, detailed plans for continuing the work. The handyman had been part of something larger, something that didn't die with him. The letters described me, my habits, my schedule. They knew I'd find the box eventually. They'd been watching, waiting, planning. The circled initials weren't a threat, they were an invitation. I moved out of the house the next day, put it up for sale, priced to move quickly. But as I packed my things, I found another box. This one was newer, hidden in the attic. Inside were recent photographs of me taken from outside my house, notes about my daily routine, and a new list of names with mine at the top, not crossed out this time, starred. The house sold within a week. The new owners were a young couple with a newborn. I tried to warn them, but they thought I was crazy. The realtor assured them I'd had a breakdown, that the house was perfectly safe. They moved in during the spring when the floors were solid and the basement was dry. I drive by sometimes late at night. The lights are always on in the nursery. I can hear the baby crying from the street, but last week the crying stopped. And this morning I saw a moving truck in the driveway. The family was loading boxes, moving quickly, not making eye contact with anyone. They left before noon and the house is empty again. The for sale sign went up this afternoon. I know someone will buy it soon. Someone young, optimistic, looking for a good deal. They'll find the house charming, the price reasonable. They'll move in with hopes and dreams and maybe a child of their own. And eventually they'll decide to renovate. They'll pull up the carpet, examine the floorboards, and find what's waiting underneath. I still have the key to the post office box. I check it sometimes, though I know I shouldn't. The letters keep coming, but now they're addressed to someone else. Someone who just bought a house with soft floorboards and a quiet basement. Someone who doesn't know they're already on the list. I could warn them, I could try to stop what's coming. But I remember what the elderly neighbor told me about the man with gentle hands and wrong eyes. Some things are better left buried, and some games, once they choose you, never really end. Crime 7, I dropped my keys outside the coffee shop. When I picked them up, I noticed a strange extra key on the ring. No engraving, no markings. That night, I passed a house I'd never seen before, and on a weird impulse, I tried the key. The front door clicked open. Inside, the air was cold, too cold. The lights flickered. Every photo on the wall showed a version of me wearing different clothes in rooms I didn't recognize with people I didn't know. Whoever lived there had been watching me for years, and the key, that was their invitation. I should have called the police immediately. Instead, I stepped inside. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet with the kind of sound that makes your teeth ache. The house smelled like old newspapers and something else I couldn't identify, something metallic and bitter. I reached for the light switch, and when the overhead bulb flickered to life, I saw them clearly. The photographs lined every wall like some twisted gallery. There I was, walking out of my apartment building. There I was again, sitting in the library where I spent most afternoons. Another showed me at the grocery store, reaching for something on the top shelf. My hands began to shake, not from fear exactly, from recognition. I moved deeper into the house, each step revealing more impossible details. The kitchen counter held a coffee mug identical to the one I'd bought last month. The refrigerator was covered with takeout menus from restaurants I frequented, numbers circled in red ink. On the table sat a notebook, its pages filled with handwriting that looked disturbingly similar to my own. Lists of my daily routines, my favorite routes to work, the names of people I'd mentioned in passing conversations. Someone had been studying me like a subject in an experiment. I picked up the notebook, feeling the weight of the pages between my fingers. The paper was slightly damp, as if it had been handled recently. The entries went back months, maybe longer. Each page detailed movements I barely remembered making, conversations I'd forgotten having. But what disturbed me most was the accuracy. Whoever wrote this knew things about me that I'd never told anyone. The sound of a car door slamming outside made me freeze. Footsteps approached on the graveled driveway. I had seconds to decide whether to hide or confront whoever was coming home. I chose neither. I ran. Back at my apartment, I sat on my couch staring at the extra key. Under the lamplight, I noticed something I'd missed before. Tiny scratches along the metal surface, too deliberate to be accidental. They formed letters, barely visible. When I held the key at the right angle, I could make out a single word: welcome. The next morning, I returned to the coffee shop where I dropped my keys. The barista, a young woman with tired eyes, recognized me immediately. She leaned across the counter when I approached, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You found it, didn't you?" she said, "the house." My blood went cold, she continued before I could respond. "I was supposed to tell you. They said you'd come back asking questions. They said to give you this." She slid a sealed envelope across the counter. My name was written on the front in that same familiar handwriting from the notebook. Inside was a single photograph. Me standing in front of the house, key in hand, about to insert it into the lock. But this photo had been taken from inside the house, through the front window. Someone had been watching me discover them watching me. On the back, in careful script, "Some doors are meant to be opened. Some people are meant to be found. You've been looking for us as long as we've been looking for you." I went to the police station that afternoon. The officer who took my report was professional but skeptical. He asked for the address of the house. When I tried to retrace my steps, I couldn't find it. The street where I'd turned that night seemed to have vanished. The officer suggested I might have been confused, disoriented. People often misremember details under stress. But I had the key, I had the photograph, I had the notebook I'd taken from the kitchen table. Except when I reached into my bag, the notebook was gone. The photograph had faded to blank white paper. Only the key remained, and even that looked different now, older, more worn, like it had been carried in someone's pocket for years. The officer filed a report, but warned me it would be difficult to investigate without a location. He suggested I change my locks, install security cameras, take the standard precautions. His tone suggested he thought I was another person whose imagination had gotten the better of them. That night I lay in bed trying to make sense of what I'd experienced. The logical part of my mind offered explanations: stress from work, too much caffeine, the power of suggestion after finding an unfamiliar key. But logic couldn't explain the feeling that had settled deep in my chest, the certainty that I was still being watched. I got up and checked my locks, all secure. I peered through the blinds at the empty street below, nothing unusual. But as I turned away from the window, I noticed something that made my knees weak. On my kitchen table sat a coffee mug I didn't remember using. Steam rose from its surface, and beside it lay a folded piece of paper. With trembling fingers, I opened it. "Thank you for visiting. We hope you'll come back soon. The door is always open for you." I checked every window, every entrance to my apartment. Everything was locked from the inside. No one could have entered without my knowledge. Unless they'd never left. I think about that house every day now. I've driven through neighborhoods I've never seen before, looking for familiar architecture, searching for that particular combination of shadows and angles. Sometimes I think I catch glimpses of it in my peripheral vision, but when I turn to look directly, there's nothing there. The key remains on my ring, heavier than it should be. Sometimes I catch myself running my thumb over those tiny scratches, feeling for the word that might or might not be there. Welcome, or maybe it says something else entirely. I've started noticing things, the way certain strangers look at me on the street as if they recognize me from somewhere. The way conversations stop when I enter a room. The way my own reflection sometimes seems slightly wrong in mirrors, like I'm seeing someone who looks like me but isn't quite me. Maybe I imagined the whole thing. Maybe the key was always on my ring and I just never noticed it before. Maybe the house was a dream and the photograph was a trick of light and shadow. But every night before I go to sleep, I find myself wondering, what if the key still works? What if the house is still there, waiting for me to find it again? What if the people who have been watching me are still watching, still taking notes, still adding to that collection of photographs on the wall? And the question that keeps me awake, what if I want to go back? Crime 8, I bought a used baby monitor at a yard sale even though I don't have kids. I just liked how it looked vintage, harmless. I set it on the shelf as a joke. That night I heard breathing through the speaker. Slow, steady, close. I unplugged it. The sound didn't stop. It got louder. Then came the faint sound of footsteps across wooden floors. My floors are carpeted. I smashed the monitor to pieces. But the next morning it was back on the shelf, fully intact, and playing nothing but silence. The kind that waits. I stared at that monitor for what felt like hours. My hands were shaking as I picked it up, turning it over, examining every crack and crevice. The plastic was warm, as if someone had been holding it all night. The battery compartment was empty, yet somehow it had been functioning. I pressed the power button. Nothing, dead silence, but I knew what I had heard. The woman who sold it to me lived in a house with peeling paint and overgrown hedges. She had dark circles under her eyes and kept glancing back at the house while we talked. Her hands trembled when she handed me the monitor. She said she needed to get rid of it quickly, that it belonged to her daughter who had moved away, but something in her voice suggested otherwise. There was a weight to her words, a finality that made my stomach turn. I decided to go back. The house looked different in daylight, quieter. The windows were covered with thin curtains and I could see shapes moving behind them. I knocked on the door, no answer. I knocked again. The curtain in the front window shifted slightly and I saw an eye peering out at me. Still no answer. I left my phone number tucked under the doormat with a note asking her to call me about the monitor. She never called. Instead, I started receiving calls from an unknown number, always late at night. Always the same pattern, 3 rings, then silence. When I answered, I could hear that same breathing I had heard through the monitor. Slow, deliberate, as if someone was trying to communicate without words. I started recording these calls. The breathing was consistent, rhythmic, like someone in deep sleep. But there was something else underneath it, a faint scratching sound like fingernails against wood. I traced the number through a reverse lookup service. It belonged to a landline that had been disconnected 3 years ago. The last registered address was the same house where I bought the monitor. I printed out the records and spread them across my kitchen table. The more I looked at them, the more questions emerged. Why was a disconnected line still making calls? How was the monitor working without batteries? And why did the breathing sound so familiar? I started visiting the house regularly, parking across the street, watching. The woman rarely left, but when she did, she moved like someone carrying an invisible weight. She would stand at the mailbox for long periods, staring at nothing, her mouth moving silently. Other neighbors avoided her. When I asked the mailman about her, he just shook his head and said she had been through enough. He wouldn't elaborate. The breakthrough came when I found a newspaper article from 4 years ago. A child had gone missing from that neighborhood, a little girl just 2 years old. The article mentioned that the parents had been using a baby monitor to keep track of her during naps. The last transmission from the monitor was the sound of breathing, then nothing. The child was never found. The parents moved away shortly after, all except the mother, who refused to leave. I realized I had been hearing the last recording from that monitor. Somehow it had captured the final moments before the child disappeared. The breathing wasn't random, it was a loop, playing over and over, trapped in the device's memory. But that didn't explain how it continued to function, or why it had returned to my shelf after I destroyed it. I confronted the woman at her front door. She opened it this time, but only slightly. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow. She asked if I had heard her daughter's voice yet. I told her about the breathing, the phone calls, the way the monitor seemed to have a life of its own. She nodded slowly, as if she had expected this. She invited me inside. The house smelled of dust and something else, something sweet and cloying. Every surface was covered with children's toys, all perfectly arranged, as if waiting for someone to return. She led me to a small room at the back of the house. It was painted pink, with a crib in the corner and that same model of baby monitor sitting on the dresser. This one was newer, cleaner, but it was making the same soft breathing sounds. She told me she had been trying to give away the monitors for years. Every time someone bought one, it would eventually find its way back to her. She had dozens of them now, all playing the same recording. She said her daughter was still there, still breathing, still waiting. She asked if I would help her listen, help her understand what her daughter was trying to tell her. I left without answering. The monitor was gone from my shelf when I got home, but the breathing sounds continued. They came from the walls now, from the spaces between things. I started hearing them everywhere, in the hum of the refrigerator, in the whisper of air through the vents, in the silence between heartbeats. I moved away from that town, but the sounds followed me. I changed my phone number, but the calls continued. I threw away every electronic device I owned, but the breathing persisted, because I finally understood what the woman had been trying to tell me. Some sounds never stop. They just find new ways to be heard. The monitor sits on my shelf again. I don't remember buying a new one. I don't remember bringing it home. But it's there, playing its endless loop of breathing, waiting for me to understand what it's really trying to say. And late at night, when the house is quiet and the world feels thin, I think I'm beginning to hear it. Not just breathing, whispers, words, a voice that sounds like it's coming from somewhere I can't reach. Sometimes I wonder if the child was ever really missing. Sometimes I wonder if the woman at the house was ever really there. And sometimes, in the darkest moments before dawn, I wonder if the breathing I hear is my own, recorded and played back by something that knows exactly how to wait. Crime 9 behind the house was a rusted shed. I never paid it much attention until I noticed it had a door bolted from the outside. When I opened it, there was no back wall, just a narrow staircase leading down into a corridor that shouldn't exist. Concrete walls, fluorescent lights, dozens of locked doors on either side. No noise, no air, just endless silence. I turned around to leave and realized the staircase had disappeared. Behind me, one door creaked open slowly. Something inside whispered my name. I never told anyone what I found there. Mostly because I don't know if I ever really got out. The property came with documentation, but the papers felt wrong in my hands, too clean for something that old. The previous owner had died under circumstances the real estate agent described as natural causes, but her voice caught when she said it. I found myself returning to those documents, searching for inconsistencies I couldn't name. The basement blueprints didn't match what I'd seen underground. According to the architectural plans, solid earth should have been where I found that corridor. I called the city planning office, claiming I needed the original building permits for renovation purposes. The clerk's voice turned careful when I mentioned the address. She told me those records had been sealed pending an ongoing investigation. I started visiting the neighbors, introducing myself as the new owner. Most were polite but distant. One elderly woman across the street invited me in for coffee. Her kitchen smelled like vanilla and something else, something chemical I couldn't identify. She kept glancing toward my house while we talked, her fingers drumming against her cup. The previous owner was a quiet type, she said, kept to herself, but there were sounds at night, machinery running, vehicles coming and going. She paused, studying my face. You seemed different, more curious than she was. I asked about the sounds. She described a rhythmic thumping that would start after midnight and continue until dawn. Always the same pattern, always from the direction of my backyard. When I pressed for more details, she claimed her memory wasn't what it used to be, but her eyes remained sharp and alert. Back home, I examined the shed more carefully. The bolt wasn't original, fresh scratches in the metal suggested recent installation. Someone had wanted to keep that door closed. The wood around the hinges showed stress fractures, as if the door had been forced open repeatedly. I found dried stains on the threshold that looked like rust but smelled wrong. I called a soil testing company, telling them I was concerned about contamination from the old shed. The technician arrived 2 days later, a young man who seemed nervous despite his professional demeanor. He took samples from around the foundation and promised results within a week. The report arrived faster than expected. Elevated levels of calcium hydroxide and traces of muriatic acid in the soil. The technician's handwritten notes suggested these chemicals were consistent with concrete work, but the concentrations seemed unusual for a residential property. He recommended further investigation. I hired a different contractor to examine the foundation. He was older, more experienced, and asked fewer questions. While he worked, I noticed him pausing frequently, running his hands along the basement walls. When he finished, he packed his tools with unusual care. "Your foundation's solid," he said, but his tone suggested something else. Though I found some inconsistencies in the concrete work, different mixing ratios, like it was poured at different times by different people. He left quickly, declining my offer of payment for a rushed job. I found his business card in my mailbox the next morning with a handwritten message. Some things are better left alone. The neighbor woman visited unexpectedly that evening. She brought a casserole and lingered in my kitchen, her eyes constantly moving toward the basement door. We made small talk about the weather, but her tension was palpable. When she finally left, I found a folded piece of paper tucked under my sugar bowl. It contained a phone number and a single word: help. I called the number that night. A man's voice answered, cautious and tired. He wouldn't give me his name, but he knew my address immediately. He'd been waiting for my call, he said, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. She wasn't the first owner, he told me. There were others, always quiet people, always people who kept to themselves. The house has a way of attracting a certain type. His breathing sounded labored. I investigated the previous disappearances. 3 people in 15 years, all ruled as voluntary relocations. He described finding similar underground structures in other properties, always connected to houses with suspicious ownership histories. a network of tunnels and rooms that served purposes he couldn't prove but strongly suspected. When he tried to involve law enforcement, his evidence had disappeared from the station overnight. "Check the pipes," he said before hanging up. "The basement plumbing will tell you everything you need to know." The basement felt different now that I knew what to look for. The pipes were newer than the house, installed with professional precision. But they didn't connect to the municipal system. They led somewhere else entirely. I followed them along the ceiling until they disappeared into a wall that sounded hollow when I knocked. Behind that wall, I found a room I hadn't noticed before. Small, windowless, with drain systems that suggested frequent cleaning. The air tasted metallic. Plastic sheeting had been stapled to the walls, recently removed based on the freshness of the holes. I photographed everything, but the pictures came out distorted, as if something was interfering with the camera's electronics. I tried using my phone instead, but the battery drained completely within minutes despite being fully charged when I entered the room. The anonymous caller contacted me again, this time requesting a meeting. We arranged to meet at a diner far from my neighborhood. He was younger than his voice suggested, with prematurely gray hair and hands that shook slightly when he reached for his coffee. "I've been tracking this for years," he said. "The pattern is always the same. Someone buys the house, lives there quietly for a while, then disappears. The property gets sold again, usually to another single person with no close family ties." He showed me photographs from his investigation. Similar houses, similar basement modifications, similar disappearances. The connecting thread was always the same real estate company, the same legal firm handling the transactions, the same pattern of ownership transfers. "The previous owner of your house," he continued, "she lasted longer than most, almost 3 years. But she started asking questions just like you're doing now. Started talking to neighbors, hiring contractors, making phone calls." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She found something in that shed, something that changed everything. The last time anyone saw her, she was carrying a shovel toward the backyard." I returned home with a new understanding of my situation. The shed wasn't just a storage space, it was an entrance to something larger, something that required maintenance and secrecy. The previous owner had been both victim and accomplice, just as I was becoming. That night I heard the sounds the neighbor had described, rhythmic thumping from somewhere beneath the house, machinery running, vehicles arriving and departing. But when I looked outside, the street was empty. I realized I had been asking the wrong questions. The mystery wasn't what had happened to the previous owner, it was what she had been doing in the years before her disappearance. The shed wasn't the beginning of the story, it was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The truth was simpler and more terrifying than I had imagined. I wasn't investigating a crime that had already happened. I was discovering a crime that was still happening, one that required new participants to replace those who had served their purpose. The morning brought a phone call from the real estate agent. She wanted to schedule a property inspection, she said, just a routine check to ensure everything was in order. Her voice carried the same careful tone I remembered from our first meeting. I agreed to the inspection, knowing now that refusal wasn't really an option. The shed door remained bolted from the outside, but I understood now that it wasn't meant to keep people out. It was meant to keep something in. The investigation had changed me. I found myself studying the neighbors differently, wondering who else knew about the network of tunnels and rooms. I started receiving packages I hadn't ordered, deliveries that came at odd hours and contained items I didn't recognize but somehow knew how to use. The basement room called to me now, not with whispers or supernatural compulsion, but with the cold logic of necessity. I had become part of something larger than myself, something that required participation rather than observation. The shed door remains bolted from the outside, but now I understand that some doors aren't meant to be opened from the wrong side. Some investigations led to conclusions that change the investigator more than they reveal the truth. I still don't know if I ever really got out of that underground corridor, but I'm beginning to understand that the question itself might be irrelevant. The important thing is learning to live with the answer, whatever it might be. Story 10. The gentle current whispered its lullaby that serene morning, the water mirroring the sky in perfect stillness. The fisherman, lost in his thoughts, almost missed the sight of a peculiar suitcase bobbing near the shore. Initially dismissing it as a pile of discarded clothing, his curiosity pulled him closer. But as he approached, a noxious odor assaulted his senses, thick, suffocating, impossible to ignore. The case was ensnared in chains, its once gleaming edges now corroded by time and exposure to the elements. When the authorities pried it open, it was not garments they uncovered, but a haunting sight. Hair clung to the interior, fingers frozen in a macabre grip, and at the very bottom, a chilling note with just 3 words, "This isn't the first." Detective Sarah Mercer, with a delicate touch of her handkerchief at her nose, surveyed the grim tableau before her. The victim, a woman in her mid-30s, with dark tresses and pallid skin marred by the cruel embrace of water, lay silent and still. The meticulous medical examiner meticulously catalogued every detail before the body was respectfully removed from its watery grave. What struck Mercer amidst the horror was not just the callous disposal of the victim, but the eerie sense of reverence in her presentation: manicured nails, recently styled hair, clad in luxurious attire. She was not merely discarded here, Mercer observed, her eyes following the gentle dance of the water against the muddy bank. She was carefully readied, adorned. The victim, identified as Catherine Walsh, a successful real estate agent renowned for her dealings in high-end properties. Divorced, childless, she inhabited a solitary existence in an affluent neighborhood. Colleagues painted a portrait of her as driven, precise, and fiercely private. Her sudden disappearance, flagged by her concerned assistant after missing a crucial showing to esteemed clients, raised alarm bells. She would never have missed that appointment, her assistant affirmed during interrogation. That sale was to be her crowning achievement. As investigators combed through Walsh's impeccably arranged modern abode, a sense of unease settled upon them. Every facet of her home exuded perfection: designer furniture meticulously positioned, surfaces immaculate. The fridge housed meticulously labeled meals for each day, the closet an array of clothing organized by hue. Yet a peculiar sight awaited in her home office, a slightly ajar drawer revealing a leather-bound journal. The final entry sent shivers down their spines. He's watching again. The same car, different plates. Delving into Walsh's digital footprint unveiled a disconcerting pattern in her inbox: numerous messages from unknown sources, all bearing the ominous phrase, "I see your perfection," dispatched at precise intervals on various days. Her online searches for security systems and self-defense tools added a layer of foreboding to the investigation. Mercer, piecing together these puzzle pieces with her astute partner, discerned a haunting truth. Our perpetrator is not driven by rage but by ritual, she mused, her gaze fixed on the rippling waters. The breakthrough arrived unexpectedly. as a local pawnshop owner identified Walsh's distinctive emerald necklace among the items pawned by a regular customer, Michael Linden, an unassuming maintenance worker. Surveillance footage unveiled Linden's repeated visits to Walsh's residence, sometimes laden with his maintenance gear, other times unaccompanied. All visits meticulously scheduled during her absences while showcasing properties. A search of Linden's modest dwelling unveiled a chilling tableau walls adorned with photographs of Walsh and other women, all sharing a striking resemblance, all captured without their knowledge. Some images were ominously crossed out in red ink. Walsh counted as the third victim in his twisted collection. Concealed behind a false panel in his closet lay a shrine of macabre devotion. Each victim's possessions meticulously arranged, a brush entwined with strands of hair, tissues imprinted with lipstick, keys, and receipts. A small notebook detailed their daily rituals, preferences, and quirks. The interrogation room turned frigid as Linden was brought in for questioning. His composed demeanor, juxtaposed with the chilling evidence, sent shivers through the room. They were flawed, he finally intoned, his voice devoid of emotion. They projected perfection, but I saw through their facade. Catherine's desk drawer was always in disarray. Her lipstick application never flawless. Her perfection was a charade. The search for the two missing victims referenced in his cryptic note led investigators to desolate locales where two more suitcases surfaced, each harboring women resembling Walsh real estate agents who touted their meticulous attention to detail. During Linden's trial, his impassive countenance betrayed no hint of remorse as the prosecution unveiled his monstrous deeds. Months of stalking, meticulous observation of their lives, followed by a twisted act of correction to what he perceived as their imperfections, styling their hair, applying makeup with precision, adorning them in finery, preceded their tragic fate. Families of the victims bore witness in silence as the judge pronounced a life sentence, closing the chapter on Linden's reign of terror. For Mercer, the case was officially concluded, yet shadows of doubt lingered. What inner demons drove Linden to fixate on these specific women? What flaws within himself did he seek to expunge through these horrific acts? The river, a silent witness to the darkness that transpired by its banks, continued its unhurried journey downstream, erasing all traces of the macabre episode. But within the precinct, on Mercer's desk, rested copies of those harrowing notebooks, a sobering reminder that beneath the veneer of normalcy, darkness may lurk, waiting to unveil itself. In the realm of seemingly ordinary lives, the most perilous predators may be those concealed in plain sight, watchful, patient, awaiting that one flaw to expose itself. Story 11. The aging apartment held onto its secrets, its peculiarities evident in the groans of the pipes and the eerie creaks of the floorboards. Yet the newest resident, Sarah Coleman, sensed a disturbance in the familiar noises that echoed through the building. The footsteps that echoed from above were too precise, too deliberate for comfort. Sarah, residing on the top floor, felt a chill of unease creep over her as the footsteps continued night after night. One evening, mustering her courage, she tentatively tapped the ceiling with a broomstick. The sound ceased abruptly, plunging the space into an unsettling silence. Then, in a chilling response, a single knock reverberated from within the ceiling itself. Sarah's heart raced with a mixture of fear and confusion, but she chose to keep the bizarre incident to herself, dismissing it as the settling of the old building or the presence of a stray animal in the attic. As the night stretched on, the relentless footsteps persisted, tracing their phantom paths across her ceiling in the cloak of darkness. Sarah coped by cranking up the volume of her television, drowning out the haunting footfalls with any noise she could summon, desperate to evade the oppressive weight of the unseen presence lingering above. Detective Morris was drawn into the enigmatic tale when a maintenance worker stumbled upon a concealed crawlspace during routine repairs in the building. Removing a section of drywall to address a water leak outside Sarah's unit, the worker inadvertently uncovered a hidden passage that defied the building's known layout. Within this clandestine space, a disturbing makeshift living area emerged, adorned with remnants of human presence, a tattered blanket, discarded food wrappers, a few water bottles, and a worn notebook. Prompted by the worker's harrowing discovery, the building superintendent promptly alerted the authorities. Detective Morris, accompanied by his partner Detective Rivera, arrived at the scene to find the worker visibly shaken, muttering about someone living within the walls, someone watching. The notebook, a chilling chronicle of Sarah Coleman's routines and habits, hinted at an obsessive, unseen observer fixated on her every move. The final entries, marked by a descent into madness, spoke of Sarah's defiance and the observer's ominous declaration of being ignored. Forensic experts meticulously combed through the hidden passages, unearthing fingerprints that yielded no matches in any known database. The intricate network of passageways interwoven within the building's structure bore witness to a sinister history, with connections to multiple apartments but converging upon Sarah's dwelling, their sole viewing point. Interviews with current residents yielded little beyond the ordinary cacophony of communal living, while former inhabitants whispered of feeling a chilling presence, sensing unseen eyes upon them, their fears silenced by the dread of sounding delusional. A breakthrough in the case emerged as forensic analysis revealed minuscule traces of blood in one of the concealed compartments, ultimately linked to a vanished former resident named Martin Weaver. The pieces of the puzzle began to coalesce, shedding light on a pattern of disappearances intertwined with a shadowy figure known as Edward Mercer, a recluse with a penchant for solitude and a disturbing fixation on silence. Delving deeper into Edward's past, investigators unraveled a web of hidden identities and unsettling obsessions, tracing his trail of transient existence through various top-floor apartments across decades. A neighbor's recollection painted a portrait of a brooding figure consumed by an insatiable need for quiet, a facade masking a dark reality of clandestine surveillance and unspeakable deeds. A journey to a remote cabin unveiled the extent of Edward's twisted world, adorned with photographs of unsuspecting residents, intricate schematics of building layouts, and cryptic notes detailing his sinister observations and maintenance of his macabre habitat. The walls bore witness to the agony of the missing, their voices silenced by the chilling reality of their fate buried beneath the earth, their cries echoing in the hollow chambers of Edward's chilling domain. As the hunt for Edward intensified, a sense of foreboding lingered in the empty spaces of Sarah's apartment, where echoes of her disappearance whispered of a presence that defied detection. The remnants of Edward's unseen handiwork hinted at a calculated game of cat and mouse, a dance of shadows played out in the hidden recesses of the building. The search for Sarah Coleman continues, a haunting reminder of the unseen forces that lurk within the walls of ordinary existence. Detective Morris, haunted by the phantom echoes of the past, finds solace in the quiet of his own home, the weight of unanswered questions heavy upon him. As he gazes upward, listening to the silence that envelops him, he wonders about the unseen eyes that may be watching, waiting, biding their time in the hidden spaces between worlds. Story 12, a pocket dial, a mere accident of technology static, muffled sounds that almost went unnoticed by the operator until a voice broke through the chaos. A woman's voice, filled with urgency and fear, whispered, "He's here." And then silence descended once more. The mysterious call originated from an empty house, a dwelling left to decay for years, its secrets buried deep within its walls. There were no signs of forced entry, no disturbances to suggest a living presence. Yet in the midst of the abandoned kitchen, amidst the layers of dust that coated every surface, there sat a phone, its screen eerily aglow. The call had been made mere minutes ago, a fact that sent a shiver down Detective Morgan Reed's spine as she played back the recording for the 5th time. The whisper lingered, haunting her with its desperation, its terror, its impossibility. This forsaken property had once belonged to the Sullivan family, until they fled after a devastating fire ravaged the west wing of their home. No one had inhabited the house since their departure. The caretaker, a faithful soul who visited monthly, adamantly claimed that no intruders had trespassed within its walls. "Background check on the number," Morgan inquired of her partner, Detective Walsh. The answer revealed that the number was registered to Catherine Sullivan, the deceased daughter of the former residents. Catherine had perished in a tragic car accident 3 years prior. Morgan gazed at the phone enclosed in an evidence bag, a perplexing piece of a puzzle that refused to fit together. A deceased woman's phone making calls from a deserted abode defied logic. The dust on the counter was disturbed only beneath the phone, as though it had materialized there out of thin air. The forensic team's efforts yielded no tangible leads, no identifiable fingerprints on the device, no footprints to trace a path to or from the house. The doors remained locked, the windows sealed shut. And yet, the heart of the investigation lay within those 11 seconds of static, of breath, of 5 chilling words. Voice analysis confirmed that the whispered message matched Catherine Sullivan's voice from archived videos with an astonishing 98% certainty. The timestamp of the call aligned precisely with the moment of Catherine's tragic passing, down to the minute. Morgan and Walsh delved into Catherine's past, interviewing all who had known her. Her father, now remarried, appeared genuinely bewildered. Her mother, living a solitary existence in a modest apartment, crumbled upon hearing the recording. "That's my Katie," she murmured. "She sounds so afraid." Catherine's former boyfriend, Mark Jennings, had an alibi for the time of the call. He had been working a night shift at the hospital, corroborated by numerous witnesses and security footage. Moreover, the house had stood empty. The call should have been an impossibility, and yet it had manifested. The investigation reached an impasse until a call from Catherine's mother reignited the flames of inquiry. "I found something among her belongings," she quivered. Katie kept a journal, the final entry. "Oh, you must see it." Within the pages of the journal lay a narrative of Catherine's tumultuous relationship with Mark. It began with love, evolved into control and isolation, and culminated in fear. The last entry bore a chilling declaration. "He discovered my intentions to leave. His rage knows no bounds. If harm befalls me, it will not be accidental." Confronted once more, Mark's fa-dev confidence crumbled under the weight of the journal's revelations. "You suspect me of harming Katie over mere words." He retorted, "That is not evidence." Morgan pointed out, "The accident report places you at the scene before emergency services arrived." Mark's complexion paled. "I was worried when she failed to appear. I went in search of her. Her vehicle veered off a secluded road. How did you pinpoint her location?" His response faltered. "I already told you I was concerned." Revisiting the accident site, investigators ordered ground-penetrating radar scans, leading to a startling discovery: Catherine's actual phone, buried 20 feet from the crash site. The phone found in the house was merely a decoy stored at her parents' residence. Analysis of the buried phone unveiled deleted messages exchanged between Catherine and her sister on the night of her demise. Mark has uncovered my plans to leave. He's tailing me in his car. And later, he's forcing me off the road. Upon reviewing the autopsy photographs, the medical examiner identified defensive wounds on Catherine's hands and bruising patterns indicative of strangulation evidence that contradicted the narrative of a mere car crash. When the police moved to apprehend Mark, they discovered his absence. His apartment, however, revealed a shrine dedicated to Catherine photographs, stolen mementos from her family, and clippings chronicling her death. Among his possessions lay audio editing software and scripts detailing the fabrication of the ghost call, a macabre charade designed to perplex investigators and torment Catherine's grieving loved ones. The inquiry broadened to encompass other cases involving Mark, where 2 additional young women had met suspicious ends, both deemed accidental, both romantically linked to him. 6 days into the manhunt, officers spotted Mark's vehicle parked outside the Sullivan residence. Inside, they found him seated in the kitchen, fixated on a phone identical to Catherine's. Upon his arrest, he offered no resistance. She refused to remain silent, he confessed to Morgan during interrogation. Even after I silenced her, her voice persisted, accusing me. I needed the world to believe she lingered, a phantom beyond reach. A ghost cannot testify against me. The jury swiftly rendered a verdict of guilty on charges of first-degree murder. As the sentence reverberated through the courtroom, Catherine's mother clutched her daughter's journal to her heart. Justice had prevailed not through spectral intervention, but through the unwavering voice that Catherine had left behind in her written words, her fears etched in ink, her final plea for safety. The phone from the forsaken house now rests in the evidence vault. On occasion, officers swear they hear its phantom ring, though its battery was extracted long ago. Catherine's tale endures not as a ghost story, but as a testament to the resilience of victims who find ways to speak out even when their voices have been extinguished. Story 13, Renovations always uncover the unexpected. Old newspapers, forgotten trinkets, and faded photographs emerge from the shadows of time. But for Sarah and Michael, a simple floorboard lift revealed more than they could have imagined. Nestled beneath the worn wood lay a neatly folded letter, its paper fragile and its ink a ghostly whisper of words. The message etched on the page sent shivers through their souls. Don't trust the one who knocked. Before they could absorb the gravity of the cryptic note, the ominous echo of 3 sharp raps reverberated through the silent house, a chilling punctuation to their discovery. Intrigue laced with fear gripped their hearts as Detective Alina Reed arrived on the scene, her seasoned hands carefully retrieving the mysterious letter from its hidden chamber. Sarah and Michael, unwitting participants in a tale woven long before their time, recounted the eerie knocking that had plagued them. Detective Reed delved into the murky past of the Victorian-era home, tracing its lineage back to the enigmatic Hargrove family. The house, once a sanctuary of ornate beauty, now harbored secrets that stirred the dust of the past. The investigation unfolded like a macabre dance of shadows and whispers, revealing a haunting tale of debts unpaid and sins buried. Franklin and Margaret Hargrove's lives intersected with that of a mysterious figure known as the Collector Victor Mercer, a spectral presence from the depths of memory. As the layers of time peeled back, the truth emerged from the shadows. Franklin's descent into paranoia, Margaret's silent terror, and Victor Mercer's fateful visit that sealed their destinies in blood and betrayal. The house bore witness to a tragedy long forgotten, its walls echoing with the ghostly reverberations of a past that refused to rest. Through diaries and forensic evidence, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, painting a portrait of desperation and despair. The skeletal remains unearthed beneath the foundation spoke volumes of a crime buried in the darkness of fear and regret. Justice, a cold and silent specter, finally cast its gaze upon the long-forgotten crime, laying bare the truth that had festered in the shadows for 2 decades. Sarah and Michael, mere bystanders in a tale of woe, chose to sever ties with the haunted home, leaving it to the whispers of the wind and the echoes of the past. The house, now a silent sentinel of secrets, stood empty, its walls holding memories too heavy to bear. Local whispers spoke of ghostly echoes that haunted the halls in the dead of night, 3 distinct knocks that pierced the veil between the living and the dead. And as Detective Reed closed the case, she knew that some mysteries were destined to remain unsolved, their truths buried deep within the hearts of those who carried the weight of the past. The letter, a chilling relic of a bygone era, stood as a stark reminder: don't trust the one who knocked. In the stillness of the night, as shadows danced and whispers lingered, the house stood as a silent testament to the price paid for secrets kept and sins concealed. And in the darkness, where truth and lies intertwined, the echoes of the past whispered a chilling refrain: some mysteries are best left undisturbed. Story 14. In the quiet of the night, a faint flicker danced across the baby monitor's screen, like a fleeting shadow passing by. At first, the mother brushed it off as a glitch, a mere hiccup in the device's feed. But then, as if the night itself held its breath, the audio crackled with static, and a voice, soft and eerie, whispered, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A chill raced down the mother's spine, her heart quickening its pace in her chest. With trembling hands, she hurried to her son's room, the air heavy with a sense of foreboding. But as she reached the crib, her worst fears materialized before her eyes. The tiny form of her precious infant, Samuel, was nowhere to be found. Panic seized her, tightening its grip as she scanned the room frantically. The window stood closed, the door securely locked. The only anomaly in the room was a stuffed rabbit lying on the floor, its glassy black eyes seeming to hold a secret. In a frenzy of terror and disbelief, the mother's anguished cries pierced the silence of the night, echoing through the walls and reaching the ears of concerned neighbors. Help arrived, but all they found was a shattered mother, clutching the haunting rabbit, her world shattered by the inexplicable disappearance of her child. As the investigation unfolded, a shroud of mystery enveloped the case. How could someone enter a locked home, vanish with an infant, and leave no trace behind except for a chilling whisper and a misplaced toy? Suspicions turned to the mother, Rebecca, her past struggles with postpartum depression casting a shadow of doubt upon her. Yet, as the pieces of the puzzle began to emerge, a new narrative took shape. Forensic experts uncovered tiny fibers on the nursery windowsill, fibers that whispered of a clandestine entry from outside, a clue that led to a shadowy figure captured by neighboring security cameras, a figure skilled in the art of stealth and climbing. But as the focus shifted towards this mysterious intruder, a new revelation emerged. Daniel, the absent husband, returned under a cloud of suspicion, his hands bearing telltale signs of a hobby involving heights and danger. As the layers of deceit unraveled, a web of betrayal and deceit unfurled before the investigators' eyes. Financial records hinted at a dark motive, an insurance policy taken out on Samuel's life, secret calls made to an unknown number. The truth, elusive and chilling, finally came to light. The baby monitor, a silent witness to the night's events, had been manipulated, its signal hijacked by unseen hands. And in a basement, a woman named Elaine was discovered, cradling Samuel in her arms, her eyes vacant and haunted. The threads of the past intertwined in a tapestry of tragedy and loss. Elaine, Daniel's first wife, driven by grief and obsession, had orchestrated the abduction in a twisted bid to reclaim what she had lost. As the trial unfolded, the courtroom held its breath, listening to the haunting whispers of the baby monitor, the faint cough of a man caught in his own web of lies. Justice was swift and decisive as Daniel and Elaine faced the consequences of their heinous crimes. Rebecca, scarred but resilient, found solace in a new beginning, far from the shadows of the past. Samuel, unaware of the darkness that once enveloped him, grew up in the embrace of a mother's love, the stuffed rabbit a silent sentinel of the truth, locked away in a box of memories. And as the world moved on, cautionary tales echoed through the land, reminding parents of the dangers that lurked in the digital shadows, of the fragility of innocence in a world where whispers could hold the key to unspeakable horrors. In the hush of the night, as sleep claimed the weary souls, the tale of the baby monitor and the whispered voice lingered, a haunting reminder of the thin veil that separates the realms of safety and darkness. Story 15. The real estate listing made no mention of a basement, and the blueprints revealed no trace of it. Yet, as the family removed the worn carpet, they uncovered a hidden door beneath it. A hefty, rusted handle beckoned to be opened, requiring the strength of 3 to reveal the mystery that lay beyond. A rush of stale air, heavy with the essence of damp earth, greeted them as they descended the steps into darkness. Expecting to find storage, they instead stumbled upon a solitary chair, illuminated by a swaying light bulb above, and on the wall behind the chair, a series of photographs depicting them, images captured from within the confines of their own home. The Mercer family had settled into the suburban residence amidst the winter's early darkness, the naked trees of the neighborhood standing stark against the cold sky. They had admired the 2-story structure with its weathered siding and creaking floors, believing it to possess character and history. Little did they realize the depth of history the house harbored, or the chilling convergence it would have with their present. Detective Sarah Connors arrived at the scene accompanied by her partner, finding the crime scene unit already at work securing the area with fluttering yellow tape. Mrs. Mercer's voice had trembled over the phone as she recounted the unsettling discovery beneath their living room floor. "We must document everything before anyone else sets foot down there," Connors directed, pulling on latex gloves with practiced ease. Flash after flash of the camera illuminated the stairwell as the forensic team meticulously captured the eerie scene. The wooden steps groaned under their weight as they descended into the compact basement, akin to a standard bedroom, its concrete walls painted a somber gray. The solitary chair stood firmly bolted to the floor at the room's center, beneath the harsh glow of the bare bulb that cast elongated shadows across the space. Yet it was the lineup of photographs on the wall that seized their attention, 37 images meticulously arranged in chronological order. "These go back nearly 4 weeks," noted Connor's partner, studying the timestamps inscribed on the reverse of the prints. "Look at this one, Mrs. Mercer asleep on the couch, Mr. Mercer at the kitchen table, the children in their rooms." Investigations unveiled no signs of forced entry, no evidence of intrusion. The security system had remained silent, nothing tangible had been pilfered, privacy had been breached, along with any sense of security the family had harbored. Forensic examination revealed multiple fingerprints throughout the basement, predominantly linked to past owners of the property. A troubling pattern emerged, with the house changing hands 6 times within the past decade, each family departing within a year, selling at decreasing prices. None had ever mentioned the existence of a basement. "We must interview every previous owner," Connors ordered, flipping through her notepad. As they delved deeper into the property's past, the case grew increasingly disconcerting. Discrepancies surfaced in the property records, blueprints altered between sales, permits submitted and retracted, inspection reports redacted extensively. A breakthrough occurred during the interrogation of the contractor who had renovated the house 7 years prior. His complexion paled upon seeing photos of the basement. "That room is non-existent," he insisted, hands quivering. "I gutted that place down to the foundation. There was no basement, no door, nothing beneath the living room but earth and concrete." Extraction of data from a concealed memory card found within the light fixture revealed countless additional images, not solely of the Mercers but of former families as well. Children slumbering, parents in disagreement, intimate moments, mundane routines, all surreptitiously captured by an unauthorized presence. The investigation took a darker twist upon the retrieval of audio files from a weatherproof box concealed in the basement's corner. Conversations held in the master bedroom, kitchen, living room echoed through the recordings. Despite the advanced sound quality suggesting hidden microphones throughout the house, none were unearthed during the initial search. "We must dismantle every wall," Connors decreed, her tone laced with urgency. "Inspect the air vents, light fixtures, electrical outlets. The perpetrator has been surveilling these families for years." Beyond the wall of photographs, investigators uncovered a narrow passageway leading to a diminutive monitoring station. A desk, a chair, a laptop linked to an array of wireless cameras, and a journal brimming with meticulous observations concerning each family that had inhabited the residence. Their routines, their schedules, their disputes, their weaknesses. The script mirrored samples from the original builder of the property, a man by the name of Edward Kelvin. Official records indicated his demise during the house's construction, a detail that raised suspicion as the inquiry unfolded. No official records of his passing existed. No funeral arrangements were documented. Edward Kelvin had seemingly vanished from public archives. The final pages of the journal spiraled into disarray. Phrases like "they never glanced downward" and "they never perceived me" recurred incessantly. The concluding entry featured a singular sentence: "The next family arrives tomorrow." Analysis of fingerprints confirmed what the detectives had begun to postulate: Edward Kelvin had never vacated the house he had erected. He had merely retreated into its concealed recesses, fabricating a labyrinth of vantage points from which to observe the families who mistakenly believed themselves to be solitary occupants. The pursuit of Kelvin endured 3 days before he was discovered ensconced within a crawl space amidst the second-floor bedrooms. His physique gaunt and sinewy, attuned to navigating the narrow passages he had crafted within the walls. His eyes blinked in the glare of the flashlight beams, unaccustomed to direct illumination. During interrogation, Kelvin spoke of the families as though they were players in his private drama. He narrated their lives with the detached precision of a scientist monitoring specimens. He had refrained from physical contact, theft, or direct intervention into their lives. He had solely observed, recorded, documented. "They welcomed me in," he informed the investigators, his voice tranquil and rational. "They signed the deeds, they became mine." Psychological assessments concluded that Kelvin suffered from severe delusions, perceiving himself as a custodian of the house rather than an intruder. The families were transient guests in what he deemed his everlasting abode. The Mercer family never returned to the residence. Like their predecessors, they abandoned their possessions, salvaging only what fit into their suitcases. The house stood deserted as the legal proceedings unfolded. The trial unveiled the full scope of Kelvin's surveillance network, hidden chambers accessible solely via crawl spaces, observation points integrated into the very framework of the structure, all meticulously devised prior to the initial brick being laid. Upon the jury's verdict, Kelvin exhibited no reaction. He had already withdrawn into the recesses of his mind, where he continued to navigate unseen through the passages of the house that existed now only in recollection. The estate was eventually razed, the earth beneath it excavated and restored. However, for the families who had inhabited the space, the violation persisted. They remained haunted not by what had been taken from them, but by what had lurked unbeknownst to them, observing, eavesdropping, recording their most intimate moments from within walls they had trusted to offer protection. At times, in hushed instants, they caught themselves glancing upward at air vents, light fixtures, the meeting points of walls and ceilings, pondering if they were truly alone now, pondering if they ever had been. Story 16. The old wooden plank gave way under her weight, shifting ever so slightly, catching her attention in the silence of the house. Intrigued, she knelt down, her fingers tracing the edges of the loose board, sensing a hidden depth beneath the surface. Carefully, she lifted the boards, unveiling a dark, narrow cavity beneath the house, shrouded in mystery. At first glance, all she could see was dust and cobwebs, but as her eyes adjusted to the dim light, shapes began to materialize in the shadows: a mattress, a chair, and tucked away in the corner, a weathered notebook filled with her name, written over and over again. Detective Morgan Reed stood quietly behind Sarah Coleman, observing the mix of fear and curiosity in her eyes as she peered into the hidden chamber beneath her new home. It wasn't just about uncovering a secret room. It was about the violation of her safety, the intrusion of something sinister into what was supposed to be a fresh start for her. "Don't touch anything else." Detective Reed's voice was calm, yet commanding as she shone her flashlight into the concealed space, revealing walls adorned with surveillance photos of Sarah captured in her daily routines, unsuspecting of the watchful eyes that had been following her every move. Sarah had purchased the quaint cottage from the estate of Walter Green, an elderly man who had passed away with no known next of kin. The property, vacant for months, seemed like a charming fixer-upper on the surface. No mention of the hidden room or its unsettling contents had been made during the sale. "I never met him, the previous owner," Sarah murmured. "The neighbors said he kept to himself. I thought that basement was sealed off long ago. The inspection report never mentioned this." As crime scene investigators arrived, their tools clattering against the wooden floors, they meticulously documented the eerie findings, photographing, collecting evidence, and eventually removing the mattress, chair, and notebook from the concealed space. Forensic analysis later revealed a multitude of fingerprints belonging solely to Walter Green, painting a haunting picture of his obsession with Sarah. The timeline reconstructed by investigators was chilling. Walter had been fixated on Sarah for years before his death, blending seamlessly into her life while remaining a complete stranger to her. The department's psychologist shed light on the escalating nature of such fixation, hinting at darker intentions that could have unfolded from the hidden room. Detective Reed's inquiries led her to a former colleague of Walter's, a man who nervously divulged snippets of Walter's fixation on Sarah, hinting at possessiveness and delusional declarations of belonging. A key found in Walter's workplace locker opened a storage unit filled with replicas of Sarah's past life furniture, personal belongings, all meticulously arranged in eerie detail, a twisted shrine to his fantasy of being together with her. It was uncovered that Walter's past held a history of obsession and delusion, rooted in untreated mental health issues that resurfaced upon encountering Sarah. The revelation of his intentions to confine her, to make their twisted connection a reality, sent shivers down the spines of all involved in the investigation. Sarah made the decision to part ways with the house, unable to shake the feeling of being watched, of the unseen presence that had lingered beneath her feet. As she stood in the empty living room one final time, she pondered the what-ifs and shuddered at the thought of what could have transpired if she hadn't discovered the hidden room in time. The case closed with Walter's demise, labeled as stalking with intent to abduct, a chilling reminder of the fragility of safety and the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places. Sarah, now living far away, took precautions to safeguard herself, forever changed by the brush with a fate she narrowly escaped. The cottage changed hands, a new chapter unfolding for a young couple unaware of its unsettling past. The hidden room was sealed off, the shadows banished, but for those who knew the truth, the story of the room beneath the floor remained a cautionary tale of unseen dangers, of monsters that go unnoticed, and of lives that narrowly evade their grasp in the dead of night. Story 17, The Mystery Tape. The parcel had no return label, no tracking number, just a weathered cardboard box, slightly damp from the morning dew. It wasn't intended for her. Her address was correct, but the name was a stranger's. She could have easily disregarded it, left it untouched on the porch, but curiosity beckoned to her. She tore away the tape, anticipating books, clothes, something ordinary. Yet nestled inside was a VHS tape, accompanied by a lone sticky note that simply read, "Watch alone." Sarah Miller held the black plastic cassette in her hands, a sense of unease creeping over her. The weight felt off, burdened with an unseen gravity, as if concealing forbidden secrets. Her fingertips traced the worn edges of the tape, sensing the imperfections etched into the plastic casing. The handwritten note bore the imprint of urgency, each stroke filled with purpose. In the backdrop of her suburban neighborhood, a familiar symphony played out: the distant bark of a dog, the laughter of children, the drone of a lawnmower. Life carried on, oblivious to the enigma that had arrived on Sarah's doorstep. She brought the mysterious package inside, placing it on her kitchen counter, uncertainty clouding her thoughts. The name on the box, Daniel Whitaker, meant nothing to her. In her years of residence, she had never come across that name. The previous occupants, the Johnsons, had long moved away to be closer to family. Curiosity warred with apprehension as she eyed her VCR, a relic of the past that held sentimental value. Something about the tape called to her, a puzzle shrouded in worn black plastic. Against her instincts, Sarah inserted the tape into the machine. Static danced on the screen initially, gradually sharpening into focus. A dimly lit room came into view, illuminated by a solitary lamp. The camera angle was skewed as if hastily positioned. A man sat in a chair, his features veiled by shadows. "My name is Daniel Whitaker," the man's voice resonated, quiet yet resolute. "If you're watching this, someone has found you, which means they will find me as well." Leaning in, he revealed a countenance marked by sleepless nights and unyielding vigilance, tired eyes, rugged stubble, disheveled hair. "I am innocent," Daniel continued, his voice tinged with desperation. "I need you to believe that. They planted evidence against me, implicating me in a crime I did not commit." The camera trembled as he adjusted it, unveiling the stark surroundings: a barren room, devoid of comfort, a temporary refuge for a man on the run. "They framed me. The police report will spin lies about our supposed connection, a fabricated argument, witnesses to a fight that never happened. I never crossed paths with Catherine Walsh until I saw her lifeless on the news." His voice cracked with emotion. "Dead, murdered in her own home. and yet my DNA, my fingerprints, were inexplicably present at the crime scene. Detective Eliza Ramirez scrutinized the identical VHS tape on her desk, the fifth one to emerge. 5 tapes, 5 disparate recipients, all bearing the same plea from Daniel Whitaker, a man accused of the murder of Catherine Walsh, a man who had vanished without a trace on the day of her demise. Initially, the Walsh case seemed straightforward. A young woman, a professional, strangled in her own bedroom. No signs of forced entry, indications of a struggle. Concrete DNA evidence pointing to Whitaker, his fingerprints already on file from a minor infraction years earlier. Witnesses placing a man resembling him near her residence in the days leading up to the tragedy. A clear-cut case until the tapes surfaced. The tapes add layers of complexity. Detective Ramirez recorded her thoughts. Whitaker is either orchestrating an intricate ruse or exposing a darker truth. She surveyed her evidence board, a smiling Catherine Walsh in photographs, grisly crime scene images too haunting to linger on, maps pinpointing the delivery sites of the packages, and at the center, Daniel Whitaker's driver's license photo beseeching. The investigation took a sharp turn when Ramirez unearthed Catherine Walsh's involvement in a whistleblowing case against PharmaCorp, a potent pharmaceutical entity with governmental ties. Walsh had stumbled upon discrepancies in their clinical trial data evidence of concealing severe side effects in a hastily approved drug. She was set to testify, a former colleague confided to Ramirez, casting furtive glances toward the door. Catherine possessed incriminating documents, proof of executive complicity in the cover-up. The trial was imminent. Inconsistencies began to surface. The DNA evidence seemed too precise, strategically placed in illogical spots at the crime scene. Witness statements appeared rehearsed, echoing identical phrases across diverse accounts. Surveillance footage from adjacent buildings mysteriously corrupted during the crucial time frame surrounding the murder. 3 days after the tape, Sarah Miller received a second package. This one held a trove of documents, clinical reports, internal communications, email transcripts, all from PharmaCorp, all bearing Catherine Walsh's digital imprint. Each piece of evidence corroborated her suspicions. The focus of the investigation pivoted. Detective Ramirez connected with the other recipients of the tapes, assembling Whitaker's breadcrumb trail. Formerly an IT security specialist for a contractor serving PharmaCorp, he had never encountered Catherine but had chanced upon her name, flagged in a suspicious security protocol he wasn't meant to access. They were monitoring her, Whitaker disclosed in a subsequent tape that came to light. I stumbled upon their surveillance directives in the system. They were aware of her efforts to gather proof, and then I found myself locked out of the network. The following day, she was dead, and I was painted as the perpetrator. The breakthrough in the case occurred when Sarah Miller discerned a crucial detail in her copy of the tape that had eluded others. A reflection in a window behind Whitaker revealed a line of storage units. Collaborating with Detective Ramirez, they pinpointed the exact location. Within Unit 217, they unearthed a treasure trove, Whitaker's journal chronicling the conspiracy, Catherine's original evidence cache, and most damningly, intricate plans to incriminate Whitaker, inscribed in the handwriting of PharmaCorp's head of security, a former police officer with access to evidence handling protocols. Justice was not swiftly dispensed through a dramatic arrest, but through the methodical accumulation of irrefutable proof. 3 executives faced indictments. The security chief confessed, agreeing to testify against his superiors. The drug in question was withdrawn from consideration. Daniel Whitaker emerged from the shadows, hollow-eyed and transformed by his time as a fugitive. Charges against him were dropped, though the ordeal had left an indelible mark. A chance encounter brought Sarah Miller and Daniel Whitaker together, standing on her porch where the enigmatic package had first arrived. "Why me?" she inquired. "Why send it to my address?" His gaze, weary yet resolute, met hers. "The algorithm chose you. I needed individuals with no ties to me or Catherine, individuals they wouldn't be monitoring. People who could still rely on their own judgment amid the accusations." The erstwhile suspect and the unwitting witness shared a moment of silence, contemplating the fragile boundary between truth and manufactured deceit. Finally, Sarah spoke. The incorrect address turned out to be precisely the right one. The VHS tapes were cataloged as evidence, tangible reminders that sometimes truth arrives in unforeseen packages, bearing unfamiliar names, awaiting the inquisitive soul willing to delve deeper. Story 18. The mysterious box lay hidden beneath layers of forgotten memories in the attic of an old house, untouched by time and neglect. Among the dusty relics inside were faded Polaroids capturing moments of joy and celebration, a glimpse into the lives of strangers long gone. But one photograph stood out, shrouded in an eerie aura of the unknown. In this particular image, a family sat in a familiar living room that belonged to Rebecca, the current resident of the house. However, the family in the photo was not hers. As Rebecca's gaze lingered on the photo, a sense of unease crept over her, sending shivers down her spine. The figures in the picture smiled obliviously at the camera, unaware of the lurking presence standing in the shadows behind them, a dark figure observing their happiness from afar. Descending the creaking stairs with the unsettling photograph in hand, Rebecca felt the weight of the house pressing down on her, the emptiness and silence becoming suffocating. Placing the photo on her kitchen counter, she scrutinized it under the harsh light, noting the uncanny resemblance between her home and the strangers captured in the frame. Detective Morgan, a seasoned investigator with a weathered exterior and sharp eyes, took an interest in the photograph, delving into the history of the house and its previous inhabitants. Through meticulous research and interviews, a chilling pattern emerged. A series of families had resided in the house before disappearing without a trace, always after precisely 1 year. The trail led back to a mysterious architect named Samuel Whitfield, who had built the house before vanishing himself. As the investigation unearthed dark secrets hidden beneath the house, a grisly discovery awaited them in the basement, a macabre collection of preserved bodies belonging to the missing families, each captured in photographs taken by a sinister presence. Rebecca, now under police protection, uncovered a hidden crawlspace in the attic, revealing a disturbing sanctuary where the enigmatic watcher had kept vigil over the unsuspecting families. A journal left behind hinted at a sinister plan unfolding, signaling a chilling realization for Rebecca. As the investigation continued, a sense of foreboding lingered over the vacant house, its walls holding onto the memories of the past. The whereabouts of Samuel Whitfield remained a mystery, his existence blurred between reality and legend. And in the darkness, new photographs developed, capturing the lives of unsuspecting families as a silent watcher waited in the shadows, ready to strike once more. The truth remained elusive, hidden within the walls of the house, as those who sought to unravel its mysteries found themselves ensnared in a web of darkness and deceit. The legacy of Samuel Whitfield lived on, a haunting presence that lingered in the shadows, watching, waiting, and ready to claim its next victim. Story 19. In the quiet town, there existed a house forgotten by time, nestled at the edge of the whispering woods. Its presence was a mystery, its windows cloaked in darkness, and its porch weary from the weight of years gone by. No one laid claim to its ownership, and the origins of its construction faded into the mist of memory. The townsfolk, in their hushed conversations, never dared to utter a word about the house that stood alone. One day, a group of hikers, drawn by curiosity or perhaps by fate, wandered too close to the enigmatic dwelling. As they approached, a shiver ran through their souls, for etched deep into the wooden siding were names that seemed to pulse with a silent warning. The list of names cascaded down the eastern wall, each marking a soul long gone, lost to the mysterious embrace of the forest. And at the very bottom, fresh and untouched by time, was a name that none among them recognized. A hush fell over the group as one of them, voice trembling with disbelief, whispered, "That's mine." When the night draped its shadows over the land, a call pierced through the darkness, finding its way to the ears of the dispatchers. It was Mason Wright, the lead hiker who had stumbled upon his own name carved into the abandoned house. The responding officers, expecting a routine trespassing incident, ventured forth into the unknown, unaware of the chilling enigma awaiting them. Detective Sarah Keller arrived at the scene as the night whispered secrets to the forest. Her flashlight cut through the obscurity, revealing the weathered facade of the house. The names, 27 in total, lined the wall like silent sentinels of the past. Some names had faded into oblivion, blending with the aged wood, while others retained a sharpness as if freshly etched. And there, at the end of the haunting list, was Mason Wright, the carving still kissed by the scent of sawdust. "I've never set foot in this place before," Mason declared, his breath forming misty clouds in the cold air. "How could my name be etched here, unknown to me?" Thus began the investigation, each name on the wall a portal to a haunting tale of vanished souls. Background checks unveiled a spine-chilling truth: every name belonged to a person reported missing in the past 40 years, lost to the unforgiving embrace of the woods. Some cases lingered in the frigid embrace of uncertainty, while others remained open wounds in the hearts of loved ones. Forensic analysts meticulously documented each carving, unraveling the intricate web of time and tragedy woven into the wooden facade. The name Rebecca Hanson, the eldest among them, whispered a tale of a young woman who had ventured into the woods decades ago, never to return, leaving behind only a solitary boot by a murmuring stream. As Detective Keller delved deeper into the mystery, Mason's story remained a steadfast beacon of confusion and innocence. He professed no ties to the area, his connection to the other names on the wall a riddle unanswered by logic or reason. The focus of the investigation shifted to Mason's companions, each shadow cast upon the trail under scrutiny. Emily Chen, the group's photographer, presented images captured during their fateful hike. Amidst the snapshots, a specter lingered, a blurred figure, tall and ethereal, haunting the periphery of the frames. "We walked alone on that trail," Emily insisted, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "There was no one, yet someone was there." Detective Keller, guided by an unyielding resolve, led a team into the depths of the abandoned house. Dust danced in the air, veiling the forgotten remnants of a life left behind. But in the bowels of the structure, a chilling truth awaited discovery. Personal effects of the missing hikers lay arranged with macabre precision on wooden shelves in the basement. Watches frozen in time, backpacks laden with memories, cameras capturing ghosts of the past, wallets bearing silent witness to bygone days, all tagged with names that echoed on the wall outside. The air grew heavy with the weight of loss and unanswered questions. As the investigators combed through the relics of sorrow, a grim tableau emerged, a canvas painted with bloodstains, a mosaic of years concealed beneath layers of attempted erasure. The cadaver dogs, with their mournful howls, hinted at secrets buried beneath the earth, where the forest whispered its ancient laments. Amidst the gathering storm of revelations, Mason's demeanor began to fray at the edges. Whispers danced at the edge of his awareness, footprints marked a haunting path to his door, and unseen eyes cast their gaze upon him from the shadows. The thin veil separating reality from nightmare grew ever thinner, prompting the authorities to assign him a guardian in the shadows. A breakthrough, like a shard of light piercing the gloom, came with the unearthing of buried records in the annals of the county. The house, once belonging to a reclusive hunter named Victor Blackwood, cast a long shadow of suspicion upon the unfolding saga. An enigma of tall stature and cryptic silence, Blackwood's disappearance 15 winters past had never met the scrutiny of the law. Armed with a warrant and a resolve as unyielding as the roots of the forest, Detective Keller led a search into the heart of the woods, where secrets lay buried beneath the fallen leaves and whispered truths of the trees. The hunters became the hunted, as a hidden network of blinds bore witness to the predatory dance of a man consumed by shadows. Within the depths of one such blind, a journal whispered the twisted chronicles of Victor Blackwood, the hunter turned harbinger of darkness. His words painted a chilling portrait of a predator stalking human prey, their names etched in his ledger of doom. The manhunt surged across boundaries, a symphony of pursuit echoing through the haunted woods. Yet the shadows held their secrets close, weaving a tapestry of fear and uncertainty. Mason, a specter in his own right, vanished into the night, leaving behind only a cryptic message carved upon his chamber wall. The hunter becomes the hunted. The search for Mason, an echo in the labyrinth of shadows, stretched into the yawning maw of time, relentless in its pursuit of an elusive truth. And in the heart of Blackwood's house, a revelation awaited, concealed behind a veil of deception. A hidden workshop, a shrine to the macabre art of the unseen, unveiled its secrets to the trembling hands of the forensic technicians. Woodworking tools whispered tales of creation and destruction, jars of preservatives held the essence of a twisted legacy, and a freshly carved name stood as a grim testament to a fate intertwined with the shadows. Detective Keller, a lone sentinel in a realm of whispers and shadows, set her gaze upon the house, now a fortress of dread and anticipation. Surveillance cameras blinked in silent vigil, motion sensors poised to catch a glimpse of the unseen. And on a night shrouded in uncertainty, the trap was sprung. A figure tall and spectral emerged from the heart of the forest, a wraith in the night. Unseen hands guided its ethereal dance, drawing it inexorably towards the house of shadows. As the tactical teams closed in, the cameras blinked in defiance of the truth, capturing a fleeting glimpse of the figure before it vanished into the waiting arms of the night. The house, a bastion of sorrow and whispers, stood silent in its vigil, the names on its wall a testament to the darkness that lurked within. Mason and the forensic technician, lost to the embrace of the shadows, became legends in the annals of the unsolved. The investigation, a tapestry woven with threads of fear and mystery, continues to this day. New disappearances echo through the forest, their names begging to be spoken yet eternally silenced by the weight of the past. The house, a relic of forgotten horrors, stands as a solemn reminder of the mysteries that dwell in the unseen corners of the world. And so the names on the wall, a litany of the lost, remain unspoken, their whispers carried on the wind that rustles through the haunted woods, where secrets lie buried and the shadows dance in eternal silence. Story 20. It arrived in the mail, wrapped in a plain envelope with no return address. A single brass key worn with time. The homeowner didn't recognize it, but something about it felt familiar. When she slid it into every lock she owned, nothing turned. It wasn't hers. But when she placed it on the coffee table, the old grandfather clock in the hallway let out a single, hollow chime despite having been broken for years. Sarah Miller reported the strange occurrence to authorities after finding the mysterious key. What seemed like an odd mishap soon unraveled into one of the most disturbing criminal investigations the quiet suburban neighborhood had ever witnessed. The responding officer initially dismissed her concerns. A key in the mail, perhaps a mistake, he suggested, but Sarah insisted something felt wrong. The officer reluctantly took the key as evidence, mostly to appease her, placing it in a small evidence bag that would later become central to a sprawling investigation. Detective Robert Harmon received the case file during the morning briefing. A veteran investigator with the Special Victims Unit, he had developed an intuition for cases that would evolve beyond their seemingly innocuous beginnings. The brass key sat on his desk, unremarkable yet somehow unsettling. Background checks revealed Sarah had no criminal history. A retired high school English teacher, widowed, with 2 adult children living across the country. Nothing suspicious in her financial records, phone logs, or social media. She appeared to be exactly what she claimed, an innocent recipient of something strange. The forensic team found no fingerprints on the key besides Sarah's. The envelope yielded nothing except a generic postmark from the regional distribution center. No DNA, no trace evidence. The key itself was a standard Schlage, available at any hardware store, though well-worn and at least several years old. The breakthrough came unexpectedly when Detective Harmon decided to run the key's unique bidding pattern through the department database. A cold case from 7 years prior had documented an identical key pattern belonging to a storage unit where investigators had found blood-stained carpet, cutting tools, and photographs of unidentified women. The original investigation had stalled without sufficient evidence to identify a suspect. Harmon pulled the dusty case files. The detective who had worked the case had since retired. The storage unit had been rented under a false identity, paid in cash. Surveillance footage had long been overwritten. The evidence collected had yielded partial DNA samples, but no matches in any criminal database. The photographs recovered from the storage unit showed 5 different women, all appearing unconscious. Only 3 had been identified during the original investigation, all reported missing but never found. Their cases remained open, classified as suspected homicides without bodies. Sarah Miller recognized none of the women when shown the photographs. She grew increasingly anxious as the investigation proceeded, installing new locks and a security system in her home. The question lingered, why had someone sent her this key? Harmon ordered a fresh analysis of the original evidence using newer techniques. The partial DNA sample was expanded and run through genealogical databases. This yielded a distant familial match, a second cousin twice removed from the suspect. Working backward through family trees, investigators narrowed their focus to Harold Jenkins, who had lived 2 streets away from Sarah Miller until moving away approximately 6 years ago. His current whereabouts were unknown. Further investigation revealed Jenkins had been a substitute teacher at the same school where Sarah taught, though they had minimal documented interaction. His employment records showed scattered work history, long unexplained gaps, and frequent relocations. His former residence yielded nothing unusual upon inspection. Neighbors described him as quiet, unremarkable, someone who kept to himself, the common refrain that often follows revelations about predators hiding in plain sight. The big question remained unanswered. Why send the key now? Why to Sarah Miller? Harmon theorized it might be a trophy, a warning, or perhaps a macabre invitation. The search for Jenkins intensified. His driver's license hadn't been renewed, no credit card activity, no tax returns. The digital breadcrumbs people typically leave behind were conspicuously absent, suggesting an intentional effort to remain untraceable. The true horror of the case emerged when authorities investigated a small cabin registered to Jenkins' deceased mother. Beneath the weathered wooden floorboards, investigators discovered a concealed room accessible only through a trapdoor. Inside, meticulously organized shelves held dozens of identical brass keys, each with a name and date engraved on a small attached tag. 5 keys corresponded to the women from the photographs. The remaining keys, 27 in total, presented a horrifying implication of additional victims previously unknown to authorities. Buried behind the cabin, forensic teams recovered human remains. The excavation continued for weeks as investigators unearthed multiple bodies in varying states of decomposition. Sarah received round-the-clock protection as the manhunt for Jenkins expanded nationwide. Behavioral analysts suggested the key represented a twisted invitation, Jenkins selecting Sarah as someone to appreciate his work. The press dubbed him the Keymaster, a name that spread rapidly across national headlines. Fear permeated the community as residents questioned how such horror had existed among them undetected. Detection dogs tracked a scent from the cabin into the surrounding wilderness. Search teams combed dense forest areas. Thermal imaging drones scanned terrain too dangerous for ground teams. The manhunt became one of the largest in regional history. A wildlife photographer hiking in remote woods captured an image of someone matching Jenkins' description. The grainy photograph showed a bearded man with hollow eyes carrying a backpack, heading deeper into the wilderness. Authorities closed in on the area, establishing a perimeter. Tactical teams navigated difficult terrain while psychological profilers predicted Jenkins would not surrender. They anticipated he might have prepared for this contingency with hidden supplies and escape routes. The final confrontation occurred when a patrol officer encountered Jenkins attempting to cross a river. Rather than surrender, Jenkins retreated to higher ground, where he barricaded himself in an abandoned fire observation tower. Negotiators attempted communication for hours without response. When tactical teams finally breached the tower, they found Jenkins dead from a self-inflicted wound. Beside his body lay a journal containing detailed accounts of his crimes, alongside a single brass key identical to the one Sarah had received. Inside a waterproof container, investigators discovered additional evidence, including photographs, maps marking burial locations, and personal effects taken from victims, a methodically preserved record of atrocities spanning nearly a decade. The journal's final entry addressed Sarah directly. "You never noticed me, but I noticed everything about you. The key opens nothing because what I wanted to give you cannot be unlocked with metal, only with recognition. Now everyone will remember my name." The subsequent investigation identified 32 victims in total. Families who had spent years wondering about missing loved ones finally received answers, though the closure came with the unbearable weight of confirmed tragedy. Sarah never returned to her home, unable to reconcile the horror that had brushed so close to her ordinary life. The grandfather clock that had mysteriously chimed was examined and found to contain a small wireless receiver Jenkins had been watching, waiting for the moment she received his gift. The case remains one of the most disturbing examples of predatory behavior hiding beneath a veneer of normalcy. Psychological researchers continue studying Jenkins' writings, seeking insights to identify similar offenders before they act. And somewhere in an evidence locker, A collection of brass keys sits in silent testimony to lives cut short, each key opening nothing, yet unlocking a devastating truth about the darkness that sometimes hides behind unremarkable facades. Story 21: The Enigma of the Vanishing Man. The calf had been his sanctuary for as long as anyone could remember, his presence as constant as the morning sun. Same table, same order, same enigmatic silence. The barista recognized his face, but to all others he was a nameless specter. Then one fateful day he failed to materialize. Concerned whispers fluttered through the air like fallen leaves. When the authorities inspected his customary spot, they discovered a solitary wallet abandoned on the table. Inside lay a driver's license, bearing a face but devoid of a name or address, a void where identity should have resided. Detective Sarah Mercer found herself ensnared in the enigma as she pored over the surveillance footage once more. The figure in question, now dubbed John Doe in the annals of the case, appeared unremarkable on screen. Average in stature, nondescript in visage, clad in a navy coat and bearing a weathered leather satchel. His vanishing act defied logic, for there was nothing extraordinary about him to warrant such a mysterious disappearance. "Replay it," Mercer requested of the tech specialist. The footage unfolded like a silent film, John entering the cafe during the bustling morning hours, ordering his customary black coffee with no sweetener, and retreating to a secluded corner table shielded by verdant foliage. There he sat, extracted a notebook from his bag, and commenced writing. An occasional sip of coffee, a gaze out the window, mundane actions leading up to an extraordinary vanishing act. Placing his wallet on the table, rising, heading towards the restroom corridor, and then poof, he was simply gone. "Examine the restroom footage," Mercer urged. "There lies the conundrum," the specialist replied. "No trace of him entering any lavatory. Every camera angle scoured, yet he dissolved into the ether as if erased from existence." Back at headquarters, Mercer meticulously sifted through the wallet's contents spread across her desk. The driver's license photo matched the elusive man, yet the personal details were a cipher, concealed in blank spaces. Credit cards devoid of names, only cryptic numerical sequences that led to naught when traced. Neatly stacked currency, a coffee shop receipt dated 3 days prior, and a solitary business card, its surface blank save for a faintly printed phone number in muted gray ink. A call to the number yielded only silence, punctuated by the rustle of paper before disconnecting. The barista, a silent witness to John's daily rituals, offered sparse insights. He was a man of few words, courteous, a generous tipper, perhaps an accent, though his voice was as soft as a whisper in the wind. Mercer probed further, inquiring about potential acquaintances or conversations. The reply remained negative. John, a solitary figure eternally engrossed in his notebook. The notebook, a cryptic companion to his absence, lay open on the table beside the forsaken wallet. Its pages brimmed with inscrutable symbols and coded text, befuddling even the sharpest cryptographers. Architectural sketches of unfamiliar edifices adorned certain pages, structures unseen in the vicinity. Mercer dispatched officers to canvass the neighborhood with images of John Doe, yet recognition eluded them, missing person reports failing to align with his enigmatic presence. His fingerprints, an enigma in themselves, bore no match in any known database. It was as though he existed solely within the cafe's confines. Intriguing anomalies peppered the security footage, catching Mercer's keen eye. Each morning upon John's entry, a fleeting flicker danced across the timestamp. The specialist dismissed it as a technical glitch, but Mercer harbored doubts. Returning to the cafe, she settled at his customary table, a vantage point affording a vista of the entrance and the corridor leading to the restrooms. Suspended between them hung an ancient mirror, its ornate frame etched with symbols reminiscent of those adorning John's notebook. Upon the owner's arrival, Mercer probed about the mirror's history. That old thing, a relic older than memory, immovable as a mountain, requires two to budget. Has it ever been relocated for cleaning or redecoration? Mercer inquired. Never in my tenure. Why the interest? Mercer approached the mirror, her reflection bearing a subtle distortion, a depth beyond the norm. A touch to its surface yielded unexpected warmth, defying the chill one would expect. Forensics unearthed a concealed compartment behind the mirror, within which lay a trove of identical wallets, each housing a featureless driver's license mirroring John's visage. Nestled beside them, a leather-bound journal chronicling decades of entries scribed in a hand identical to the notebook's enigmatic text. The final entry bore a foreboding message. The experiment must cease. They draw near. The aperture closes. John Doe's fingerprints peppered the hidden cache, carbon dating hinting at the wallet's antiquity, their photos frozen in perpetual youth. The journal spoke of experiments in temporal manipulation and identity transference, alluding to the notions of crossing back and window points. A pivotal passage resonated with Mercer. The calf serves as a nexus, a juncture of realities. The mirror serves as the gateway. When alignment transpires, transit becomes feasible. As the probe delved deeper, eerie occurrences unfurled around the calf. Patrons reported anomalous reflections in the window glass, whisperings of John Doe's spectral presence at his customary table, an apparition contradicting the vacant surveillance recordings. A breakthrough emerged when an elderly woman, Margaret Keller, a former physicist entangled in clandestine experiments, reached out to the authorities. She identified John Doe as Daniel Weston, a gifted theoretical physicist presumed lost in a laboratory mishap involving quantum mirrors interfaces bridging parallel realms. Keller furnished documents detailing Weston's enigmatic disappearance, aligning with the earliest journal entries found behind the mirror. Weston's theories posited a multiverse where our reality coexisted with myriad others, certain locales acting as porous junctures, portals for potential crossings. Armed with this revelation, Mercer revisited the calf's history, unearthing its genesis atop the remnants of Weston's vanished laboratory. The investigation cascaded to its zenith when Mercer, alone in the wee hours, unearthed a revelation in the surveillance footage. Reflected in the shattered mirror, two iterations of John Doe Daniel Weston intersected, one watching the other in a surreal tableau. Hastening to the calf, Mercer stumbled upon the fractured mirror, cradling a final missive scribed in that familiar hand. The experiment concludes. The aperture seals. Do not pursue. The conundrum of the phantom man lingered, an enigma unsolved. The calf shuttered its doors, the edifice succumbing to the march of time. Weston's mortal shell eluded discovery, his tomes vanishing from evidence custody under veils of secrecy. Mercer, a spectral presence in her own right, found solace in frantic notations mirroring Weston's own. A shard of the antique mirror adorned her wall, its surface rippling in unseen currents, a testament to a mystery veiled in the mists of the unknown. Story 22. The new residents brushed off the peeling wallpaper as a minor inconvenience, a simple task to refresh their new abode. But as they carefully removed each layer, a hidden narrative began to unravel. In faded ink, repeatedly scrawled across the walls, was a name. A single name that dominated every inch, written in a frenzied, uneven hand. It wasn't a name from the house's past inhabitants. It didn't appear in any official documents. Yet a quick search online unearthed a chilling connection, a missing persons case from long ago. And to their astonishment, the woman in the old photograph bore an uncanny resemblance to the previous owner who had sold them the property. Michael and Sarah Klein had never planned to dive into renovations of the Victorian-era dwelling right away. The allure of the charming old house, with its intricate woodwork and lofty ceilings whispering tales of yesteryears, had drawn them in. The price tag was surprisingly affordable, and the previous owner, a reserved, sophisticated lady with silver-streaked dark locks, had seemed eager to part with the house, citing a move across the country. It all began with a faint water stain in the master bedroom. Sarah noticed a yellowing patch marring the floral wallpaper. With a gentle touch, Michael tested the area, causing the paper to peel, unveiling another layer beneath. Intrigued, they gingerly continued peeling back the damaged section. The first layer revealed outdated paisley prints from the 1970s. Below that, striped wallpaper from an earlier era. But it was the third layer down that held a startling discovery: writing. Dark ink on faded beige paper. Not random scrawls, but a name, Elena Winters, repeated endlessly, the handwriting growing increasingly frantic and erratic. "Who is Elena Winters?" Sarah murmured, her fingers trailing over the manic script. The revelation unsettled them both. That evening, Michael sat at the kitchen island, laptop aglow, delving into property records. The house had changed hands multiple times through the years, yet no mention of Elena Winters surfaced in any documentation. The woman who had sold them the house was identified as Margaret Cavendish. Sarah joined him, clutching a mug of coffee. Try searching just the name. Their online quest yielded scarce results until they stumbled upon an archived newspaper article, digitally preserved from microfiche. Elena Winters, 27 years old, reported missing during the winter season. The grayscale image depicted a young woman with dark hair and distinctive eyes strikingly similar to Margaret Cavendish, the house's previous owner. "This article dates back 30 years, Michael murmured, barely audible above the hum of the refrigerator. Margaret would be the right age now, but Sarah swallowed hard. The missing woman's case was never solved, no body found, no suspects named. Their initial curiosity morphed into an all-consuming fascination. Sarah reached out to past homeowners, combing through county archives. Renovations took a back seat as they dedicated evenings to their impromptu investigation. They discovered that Margaret Cavendish had owned the house for a mere 7 months before selling it to them, a detail that seemed odd given the rigorous paperwork and inspections they had undergone. The retired detective assigned to the cold case had long left the force. Contacting him, Michael learned of the investigation's details. Elena Winters was reported missing by her roommate. No signs of a struggle at her place. Her abandoned car was found near the highway. The case went cold quickly, no witnesses, no evidence of foul play, just vanished. Michael hesitated before inquiring, "Did you ever speak with a Margaret Cavendish?" A heavy silence lingered over the line. "No, that name doesn't ring a bell. Why?" When they shared their findings and sent him side-by-side photos of both women, the retired detective promised to make inquiries. Soon after, a current detective reached out, seeking permission to inspect the wall. Their home transformed into an active crime scene. Forensic teams meticulously documented and removed sections of the wallpaper. Analysis revealed the ink dated back around 30 years. Handwriting analysts compared the wall inscriptions to samples of Elena's writing from old journals provided by her family. The results proved inconclusive. Meanwhile, Sarah stumbled upon a concealed space beneath the bedroom closet's floorboards. Inside rested Elena Winters' driver's license, along with several other IDs bearing different names. Each card displayed the same face with subtle alterations, varying hair shades, glasses, expressions. The ultimate ID, Margaret Cavendish, matched their home's cellar. However, when authorities tried to locate Margaret using the forwarding address she had given, they found it didn't exist. Her phone number was defunct. The bank account that received their payment had been closed. Margaret Cavendish had vanished, akin to Alina Winters decades before. A pivotal revelation arose, reshaping the investigation entirely. DNA testing of hair strands recovered from deep within the wall cavity matched Alina Winters. Yet fingerprints lifted from the writing matched a different profile altogether, one belonging to a psychiatric patient named Rebecca Eldridge, who had been institutionalized shortly after Alina's disappearance. Rebecca suffered from severe dissociative identity disorder. Escaping the facility multiple times, her medical records disclosed a disturbing detail: one of her documented alter egos identified as Alina. The inquiry unveiled that Rebecca had been Alina's childhood friend, fixated on her to the point of imitation. When Alina rebuffed her unsettling advances, something within Rebecca shattered. She assumed Alina's identity both literally and figuratively and crafted a complex tapestry of personas to sustain the facade. The name scrawled across the wall epitomized Rebecca's desperate bid to retain her grasp on reality, to recollect her true self buried beneath the fabricated identities. The wall metamorphosed into a blend of confession and incarceration, a tangible expression of her fractured psyche. Sarah and Michael observed from their porch as forensic teams excavated specific sections of their backyard, guided by ground-penetrating radar that pinpointed anomalies beneath the soil. The cold case had taken an unexpected turn. The unearthed remains belonged to Alina Winters. Rebecca Eldridge, known to Michael and Sarah as Margaret Cavendish, was eventually apprehended while trying to cross the border under yet another alias. Confronted with evidence, the persona posing as Margaret crumbled, yielding to another identity, one that admitted to Alina's murder, driven by jealousy. The names on the wall had served as both a tribute and an admission of guilt, penned by a fractured mind struggling to retain shreds of truth despite itself. Justice for Alina's family arrived 3 decades late. For Michael and Sarah, their idyllic home became infamous, a footnote in true crime lore, forever remembered as the house where the walls themselves whispered of a heinous act. Story 23, The Enigmatic House. She crossed the threshold into the abandoned Victorian, a haze of dust dancing in the stagnant air. The house stood frozen in time, its peeling walls and draped furniture telling tales of neglect. Each room she entered felt like a recurring dream with a peculiar twist. No matter which door she opened, it always led her back to the same parlor, like a haunting echo of the past. The only escape was the way she came, but when she turned, the front door had vanished into thin air. The presence of Morgan Pierce's lifeless body transformed the once-forgotten Victorian into a scene of intrigue and dread. Detective Sarah Lind stood at the doorway, observing as forensic experts moved silently through the dim interiors, their movements ghostly in the shadows. The house, known for its unsettling reputation of spinning compasses and unseen watchers, now held secrets far graver than mere superstitions. The initial assessment indicates she passed on roughly 3 days ago, the medical examiner murmured, his voice barely a whisper in the eerie stillness. It appears she succumbed to asphyxiation. Morgan was discovered seated serenely in an antique chair in the parlor, her posture poised as if awaiting a visitor, hands folded neatly in her lap. No signs of struggle, no marks of resistance. The scene exuded a quiet intensity that sent shivers down the spines of seasoned investigators. "Who stumbled upon the body?" Lind inquired, her gaze fixed on her partner. "A real estate agent showing the property to prospective buyers," came the response. They entered, caught sight of her figure, mistaking her for an intruder until they drew closer. The Victorian had remained uninhabited since the passing of its previous owner, Alina Blackwood, almost half a decade ago. Legal disputes had left the property in a state of abandonment, unwanted, unsold, and all but forgotten, save for occasional trespassers seeking thrills. Morgan Pierce, a 26-year-old graduate student delving into architectural anomalies for her thesis, was described by friends as meticulous, driven, and captivated by spaces that defied conventional norms. The allure of the abandoned Victorian, with its reputation for disorienting those who dared to enter, must have beckoned to her curious spirit. Her roommate reported her missing 2 days prior, Lind noted, scanning through her notes. Morgan mentioned she was visiting the house where wanderers lose their way for her research. Further investigation unveiled that Morgan had frequented the house in the weeks leading up to her demise. Her journal entries chronicled odd acoustic phenomena, unexpected pockets of cold, and doors that seemed to lead to different realms with each opening. In her final entry, she spoke of bringing specialized equipment to capture what she referred to as spatial incongruities. Yet, this equipment remained elusive. During the autopsy, an intriguing detail surfaced: a trace amount of a rare alkaloid derived from a plant used in ancient shamanic rituals was detected in Morgan's system. While the substance was known to induce disorientation and vivid visions, the quantity found was insufficient to be fatal. She wasn't one to indulge in recreational substances, her boyfriend asserted during interrogation. Morgan was steadfast in her research methods. She wouldn't have jeopardized her perception deliberately. A digital excavation of Morgan's phone unveiled fragments of deleted conversations, exchanges with an individual who shared her fascination with the Victorian house, someone who professed to comprehend its enigmatic nature. The dialogue grew progressively intimate and enigmatic. The house harbors memories of bygone days, one message hinted. It seeks acknowledgement from a chosen few. The investigation led Lind and her team to Adam Reeves, an architectural scholar who had corresponded with Morgan. His expertise in rare spatial phenomena had captivated her interest, evolving their professional rapport into a more personal connection. When questioned, Reeves appeared genuinely distraught by Morgan's untimely passing. "The house holds a legacy," he disclosed. The original architect wove illusions and false perspectives into its very fabric. It was designed to perplex and bewilder. Morgan believed there was a deeper truth lurking within beyond mere optical trickery. However, Reeves had an alibi for the estimated time of Morgan's demise. Surveillance footage placed him delivering a lecture at a distant university symposium during the critical hours. A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source: Alina Blackwood's grandson, now residing abroad. Contacted by investigators, he unveiled a family secret concealed for generations. "My grandmother wasn't the sole Blackwood to meet her end in that house," he divulged. "There were others, always discovered in the parlor, always in a state of repose. The family dubbed it the calling." He furnished investigators with ancestral journals spanning decades, chronicling deaths initially attributed to natural causes. The recurring cycle was evident: individuals spending considerable time within the house eventually succumbed to what the family cryptically referred to as the sway. A secondary sweep of the property unearthed a concealed compartment behind the parlor hearth. Within, investigators discovered Morgan's missing apparatus and something more. A small sanctum concealed artifacts from diverse indigenous cultures, meticulously arranged in a geometric configuration. At its heart rested a sculpted effigy, its features worn smooth by generations of touch. Analysis identified the figurine as embodying a deity associated with liminal realms, thresholds between worlds. Traces of the alkaloid matching that in Morgan's system adorned the artifacts. The case took a sinister turn when forensic analysis of dust patterns within the house hinted at another presence during Morgan's final hours. Partial prints unrelated to Morgan or any known visitor were lifted from doorknobs throughout the residence. 3 weeks into the inquiry, Adam Reeves was discovered deceased in his domicile. Mirroring Morgan's posture, he sat facing the entrance, a serene countenance masking the presence of the alkaloid in his system. Clenched in his hand was a key that fit no lock within his abode, but seamlessly engaged the concealed compartment in the Victorian. In his parting missive sent to himself as a testament, Reeves inscribed, "The house doesn't ensnare you physically, it captures your perception." Morgan was correct, the doors laid where they always have, yet something deceives you into believing you're trapped in a loop. Once you grasp the verity, you can depart at will, but by then you may not wish to. Officially designated as suspicious fatalities under scrutiny, the Victorian was officially condemned, its access restricted by authorities. Nonetheless, whispers persisted of spectral lights flickering within on certain evenings, and of guests who entered but never emerged. Some locals maintained that the house beckons those who delve too deeply into its mysteries. Others speculated that Morgan and Reeves had uncovered a force ancient and potent, dwelling in the interstices between known realities. The verity remained as elusive as an exit in a house where every door led back to the commencement. Story 24. The old Polaroid held secrets within its faded frames, capturing a birthday celebration frozen in time. Faces beamed with joy, candles danced with flickering flames, a scene of ordinary happiness. Yet as the daughter sifted through the box of forgotten memories left behind by her mother, a chilling discovery awaited her. Among the familiar faces there lurked a shadowy figure, a man standing just beyond the glow of the candles, his presence unnoticed by all. With each passing photo he drew closer, a silent intruder in the cherished moments of the past. Sarah Winters uncovered the unsettling collection while sorting through her mother's attic after the solemnity of the funeral. The box, a simple label reading "Memories," held a treasure trove of nostalgia tainted by an unknown presence. What should have brought solace instead sparked a descent into darkness. In the first image, he loomed on the periphery, a vague silhouette at the edge of her childhood birthday party. By the next photo, he had crossed the threshold into the room. And in the third, he stood ominously behind her uncle, a phantom among the living. Trembling, Sarah reached out to her father, the words quivering as she described the haunting figure in the background of every photograph. His response was laced with disbelief, a sharp inhale breaking the silence before denial took hold. The eerie enigma persisted, prompting Sarah to seek answers beyond her family's memories. Detective Marcus Reed, a stoic presence in the dimly lit precinct, scrutinized the images spread before him with a seasoned eye. Rain painted patterns on the windows, casting a somber veil over the unfolding mystery. As Sarah detailed the progression of the shadowy figure, the detective's interest peaked. The man's movement through the photos, unnoticed yet deliberate, hinted at a sinister purpose. Speculations arose, theories faltered, and investigations expanded as the truth eluded grasp. Each gathering each year revealed the same haunting figure lurking in the background, a specter of malevolence undetected until now. Enhanced images unveiled clues previously concealed: a scar, a ring, a reflection, the pieces of a macabre puzzle falling into place. A breakthrough emerged from the depths of time, a connection to Robert Keller, a man with a dark past intertwined with unsolved abductions that plagued the region. Keller's presence in the shadows of Sarah's childhood gatherings unveiled a chilling reality, linking him to long-forgotten crimes that echoed through the years. The excavation of Keller's past unearthed relics of horror buried beneath the concrete foundations, trinkets belonging to missing children, remnants of lives stolen in the dead of night. Closure came at a cost, as DNA confirmed the fate of one of the vanished souls, bringing a bittersweet resolution to families long haunted by unanswered questions. Alone in her apartment, Sarah gazed at the final photo, a poignant reminder of the hidden evil that had shadowed her past. The figure in the background, once a spectral enigma, now stood exposed in the harsh light of truth. Justice prevailed, a silent guardian finally unmasked after decades of lurking unseen in the corners of cherished memories. As Sarah returned the photos to their box, a shiver ran down her spine, a reminder that dangers unseen often pose the greatest threat. The shadow figures that move unnoticed through the tapestry of time, leaving behind a trail of heartache and unanswered prayers, a chilling testament to the fragile boundary between light and darkness in the realm of forgotten memories. Story 25, the apartment exuded an air of age and history, its heating system emitting low groans and its pipes rattling in a familiar rhythm. She had grown accustomed to these sounds, finding comfort in their predictability. But one evening, as she settled in for the night, a faint voice drifted through the vents, barely audible yet undeniably present. It was not the usual background noise of neighbors or the building settling. It was a whisper, calling out to her, uttering her name with a haunting clarity. Intrigued and somewhat unnerved, she pressed her ear against the vent, feeling a chill brush past her cheek before the voice spoke again, almost teasingly, "I know you can hear me." Detective Morgan Shaw stood in the midst of the empty apartment, a sense of unease settling over her as she focused on the rusted vent cover that had been forcibly removed. The forensic team moved around her with precision, capturing every detail with their cameras. The missing woman, Alina Reeves, had been gone for a week before her absence was noticed due to a peculiar odor seeping through the building. What awaited them within the ventilation system defied logical explanation. Officer Patel relayed information from his notes, detailing Alina's claims of hearing voices through the vents, which the building management had dismissed as mere quirks of an old structure. Shaw knelt by the vent, observing the deep scratch marks surrounding it, evidence of a desperate attempt to break free from within. The realization that someone had been trapped trying to escape sent shivers down her spine. Alina, a beloved kindergarten teacher known for her nurturing spirit and vibrant houseplant collection, had displayed signs of paranoia before vanishing. Her sister recounted how Alina believed someone was watching her, speaking to her through the very walls of her home. Shaw scanned the apartment with fresh insight, noting the meticulous bed, the abandoned coffee mug, and the chair strategically placed beneath the vent, as if an unseen presence had been listening intently. Forensic analysis unveiled startling revelations, a connection between fibers found in the vent and Alina's clothing, a mysterious fingerprint inside the vent cover, and chilling audio recordings from Alina's phone. Alone in her car, enveloped by the sound of rain, Shaw listened to the haunting whispers captured on those recordings, confirming Alina's fears of an unseen entity reaching out to her. The history of the building held ominous secrets, with past tenants departing abruptly, citing strange noises and unsettling experiences within the walls. Harold Weber, the building superintendent, displayed a disconcerting nonchalance when questioned about the incidents, deflecting attention away from the dark shadows lurking in the building's history. As the investigation delved deeper, a hidden passage in Alina's bathroom revealed a clandestine route within the walls, a realm where someone had watched, listened, and whispered to their unsuspecting victims. Shaw's team uncovered a trove of incriminating evidence in Weber's possession, linking him to a twisted obsession with those he had monitored. Weber's meticulously organized files, containing intimate details and recordings of his victims, painted a chilling portrait of a man consumed by his delusions. Further discoveries in a storage unit unveiled a macabre collection of mementos from past tenants, serving as a grim testament to his predatory nature. Upon Weber's arrest, his serene demeanor belied the horrors he had inflicted. His cryptic statements about the building speaking through him only added to the enigma surrounding his motives. The trial exposed the extent of his calculated actions, leading to a swift verdict of guilt on all charges. Despite the closure brought by Weber's conviction, the apartment building remained tainted by its dark past. New residents reported eerie occurrences, whispers echoing through the vents, inexplicable drafts carrying phantom voices, and a persistent sense of unease that lingered in the air. The building's aging infrastructure continued to groan and rattle, a haunting reminder of the unsettling events that had unfolded within its walls, leaving a legacy of fear and unanswered questions in its wake. Story 26. In the heart of the town, the old library sat quietly, its fate sealed by the impending demolition. The workers toiled away, their hammers echoing through the corridors, dismantling decades of history. Yet, as the final bricks were being pried loose, a twist of fate intervened. One worker, his hands coated in dust and sweat, stumbled upon a hidden latch nestled within the dusty bookshelf. With a soft, almost imperceptible click, the entire bookcase swung open, revealing a passage veiled in shadows. The air within was heavy, a time capsule untouched by human hands for years untold. In the center of the hidden room, a solitary chair stood, bolted firmly to the floor. The walls bore a haunting message, etched over and over, "I am still here." Word of this mysterious discovery spread like wildfire, reaching the ears of the construction foreman, who wasted no time in summoning the police to investigate. What had begun as a routine demolition now unfurled into a tale shrouded in darkness and intrigue. Detective Morgan Walsh, a seasoned investigator with weathered eyes that had seen too much, arrived at the scene. His flashlight pierced the oppressive darkness, casting eerie shadows on the walls adorned with the unsettling message. "Secure the scene," Walsh commanded, his voice a low murmur that lingered in the musty air. "Let no one disturb this place until forensics arrives." As the forensic team combed through the hidden room, they unearthed chilling clues that hinted at a long-buried secret. Strands of hair and fibers clung to the ancient chair, while the scratches on the walls whispered of a struggle long forgotten. The library's history wove a tangled web around the mystery. Once owned by the illustrious Harrington family, the building had been gifted to the public following the enigmatic disappearance of their daughter, Rebecca. Her vanishing act, shrouded in ambiguity, had left a scar on the community's memory. The forensic evidence painted a grim picture. The DNA recovered from the hidden room matched that of Rebecca, linking her to the haunting chair and the cryptic message scrawled on the walls. It seemed she had not fled, but had been ensnared within the confines of the hidden room, perhaps by a familiar hand. Walsh delved deeper into the family's past, uncovering unsettling truths that lurked beneath the surface. The timing of the library's donation after Rebecca's disappearance raised suspicions, pointing fingers at a family member with a sinister agenda. Maxwell Harrington, Rebecca's uncle and a shadowy figure in the family's history, emerged as a prime suspect. His ties to the construction of the hidden room and the subsequent renovations hinted at a darker motive lurking behind his affable facade. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place with a sickening clarity. Maxwell's journal, unearthed from a hidden compartment in his study, chronicled his twisted obsession with his niece and the grim fate that had befallen her. The final entry, a damning confession of his heinous crime, sealed his fate. During interrogation, Maxwell's stoic demeanor crumbled, revealing the depths of his depravity. He confessed to imprisoning Rebecca, driven by a desire to protect the family name at all costs. The truth, long buried beneath layers of deceit, had finally clawed its way to the surface. The excavation of the hidden room unearthed more than just bones. It unearthed a truth that demanded reckoning. Rebecca's skeletal remains, adorned with a silver bracelet that gleamed in the dim light, bore witness to the horrors she had endured. As Maxwell faced his reckoning in a court of law, the Harrington family stood in silent vigil, their hearts heavy with the weight of their dark legacy. Rebecca's mother clutched the recovered bracelet, a bittersweet token of closure amidst the sea of unanswered questions. The old library, once slated for destruction, now stood as a monument to a life snuffed out too soon. Mourners gathered at its threshold, offering flowers and prayers to a soul lost but never forgotten. And in the quiet whispers of the walls, Rebecca's voice echoed, a poignant reminder that even in death she was, and always would be, still here. Story 27, The Whispering House. She desired to redecorate the nursery before the little one's arrival. The walls donned a faded blue hue, a color that harbored years of untold tales within its depths. With each stroke of white paint, a hidden secret emerged from beneath the faint outline of letters, gradually sharpening into legibility. A message etched beneath the surface. "Don't let it hear you." A sudden gasp escaped her lips. Stepping back, her eyes widened as she noticed them tiny handprints imprinted in the fresh paint, too high on the wall for any child to reach. The revelation within the nursery of the Morgan household marked the inception of what investigators would later dub as the Whispering House case. The young couple had acquired the Victorian-style abode just months prior for a suspiciously low price. The real estate agent had merely mentioned minor cosmetic issues, omitting any reference to the property's shadowy past. Detective Sarah Klein, clutching her notebook, pressed the doorbell. A woman answered, her swelling belly evident beneath paint-spattered overalls. Dark circles enveloped her eyes, testaments of sleepless nights. Observing the woman's trembling hands, the detective listened intently as she recounted the discovery of the message and handprints. The previous owners vanished abruptly, the woman elaborated. Neighbors claimed they departed in the dead of night. No moving truck, just essential items packed into their car. The detective traversed the corridors of the historic residence, the aged floorboards creaking under her weight. Standing in the nursery, she scrutinized the partially painted wall. The message still lingered beneath the abandoned paint job. Adjacent to it, 5 small handprints adorned the wet paint, situated at an adult's shoulder level. Back at the precinct, Detective Klein delved into the property records. The house had exchanged hands 8 times in 3 decades, an unusually high turnover rate. Each family had resided for less than 2 years. More disconcerting were the child welfare reports linked to 3 of those families. Children had spoken of whispers emanating from the walls and a presence watching them as they slumbered. Delving deeper, the detective unearthed construction logs and historical documents. The house had once belonged to Eleanor Blackwood, a wealthy widow who ran a small orphanage within the premises during the early industrial era. Newspaper clippings referenced 5 vanished children from her care. Authorities of the time presumed they had absconded, a common fate for orphans in that era. Upon Eleanor's demise, renovations unearthed a sealed room concealed behind the nursery wall. Inside lay children's belongings, tiny shoes, toys, and garments, but no remains. The case grew cold, relegated to dusty archives. Detective Klein interviewed former occupants, piecing together a troubling narrative. Families with children reported peculiar incidents, displaced toys, youthful laughter echoing through vacant hallways, and crayon sketches materializing on walls. Most dismissed these occurrences as figments of imagination until the cryptic writing surfaced. The message varied slightly in each account. Don't let them find you. Don't make a sound. Don't let it hear you. Yet the handwriting remained consistent, surfacing each time the nursery was repainted. A forensic linguist examined photographs of the inscriptions and confirmed a match with samples from Alina Blackwood's journals. More unsettling were the handprints uniform in size and placement over decades, despite different children residing in the home. The investigation took a chilling turn when the detective persuaded the current owners to permit ground-penetrating radar scanning in the basement. The technician identified anomalies in the readings, 5 distinct shapes beneath the concrete floor, each resembling a child's dimensions. Workers breached the concrete, revealing a macabre revelation. 5 sets of remains, arranged in a circle, were uncovered. Forensic analysis indicated the children had perished during Alina's tenure in the house. Each child bore a pendant engraved with their name, the 5 orphans who had ostensibly absconded. The detective sanctioned the application of luminol throughout the nursery. In the darkness, handprints glowed on every wall, concealed under layers of paint, imperceptible to the naked eye. Countless handprints at varying elevations, as if the children had attempted to escape. Alina's journals, salvaged from county archives, disclosed her distorted rationale. She believed that orphaned children possessed a unique spiritual essence. By confining them in the hidden chamber, she aimed to harness their vitality to prolong her own existence. The case concluded with the proper interment of the 5 victims. Their names were finally documented not as runaways but as casualties of murder. Subsequently, the house remained deserted, the expectant couple refusing to step foot inside, even to retrieve their belongings. Detective Klein submitted her final report, featuring photographs of the luminol-illuminated handprints and the concealed message. She emphasized that while justice had been dispensed for the original victims, an inexplicable presence lingered within that abode, reaching out through layers of paint and time. The nursery walls were raised during restoration, yet workers attested to hearing children's whispers emanating from the debris. None were willing to return once their shifts concluded. The house was ultimately condemned, becoming another dormant case file in a dusty cabinet, a tangible indication of closure, yet spiritual inquiries left unanswered. The detective retained a solitary photograph from the case, 5 luminol handprints glowing in the darkness, a haunting memento that certain transgressions imprint impressions that no amount of fresh paint can obscure.